difference. And that was a real wake-up call that year where we had a 95% snowpack and a 33% runoff. That was, for me, that was a whole new reality of, normally you might see a 5 or 10% difference, and to see that big of a gap was just a whole new factor in how we think about water supply. So you can kind of see up at the top there at the headwaters, it was pretty dry last fall. So we'll definitely expect a water tax to come off during this runoff. Yeah, well, let's do. Okay, so this is snowpack. Again, you can kind of see that really red area. I think you'll also see in other parts of the basin just not doing as well as kind of the headwaters. So they're really the bright spot. The drought monitor for March 13th, again, I'm looking at the whole basin of the Colorado River Basin, not just Colorado, but you can see down in the southern part of the basin, it's starting to intensify quite dramatically, which will again raise uses in the lower basin. I think, okay, that's just the water year, probable, min probable, and max probable. And that's my slides. So my other things I just wanted to mention were Shoshone. That's a big focus right now in the Colorado main stem. As you heard a report on this yesterday, so I won't belabor it. But I guess a few things to mention is I know the River District's working on their with Excel on their offer letter to the CWCB for the exclusive right for an in-stream flow, but they're also working on kind of the information related to in-stream flow, like the habitat, what's the environment that they're going to be protecting. So they're working on all those studies now in preparation for the May meeting. So we will be hearing lots more about it. I will say on the fundraising front, most people probably know this, but the River District committed 20 million, the state committed 20 million. The water users on the Western Slope committed another 16 million. So they've been doing well with fundraising, but the other piece is the federal government gave them a grant of $40 million that was part of the B2E funding, which is the Upper Basin drought mitigation money. And that money has not been unlocked, has not thawed. We're not sure it ever will. So I think that'll create quite a big hole for their fundraising. And that, by the way, is a big issue across the whole Colorado, in Western Colorado, as well as in other states. That was, $300 and something million that is now disappeared. But I'll get to that one in a second. And the other thing I wanted to mention is from the River District was that Colorado Mesa State, so they had that water center. And then when Hannah Holm left, it's kind of languished. So they're reinvigorating that. And so there was a grant just given to Mesa State to reinvigorate the center. They're going to hire a new director. They're starting that process now. And I just think that's another good resource on the Western Slope for water education and just kind of outreach to our community members in Western Colorado. The other thing I wanted to mention, and my last thing, is really related to the federal funding and federal staffing. As I mentioned, there's been a lot of federal funds that have either been frozen or just have been kind of locked up in this process. With the environmental grants, of which we were partners with a lot of folks. My day job, we were partners with a lot of different folks. There were a lot of amazing projects that have been in the works for 2 years, trying to create a pipeline of good projects for drought mitigation, fire mitigation. And now, we were very excited on January 17th and then like after the weekend, just to hear that we may never get that funding after spending 2 years working towards trying to get those funds. That was disappointing for sure. And I guess it's still not over yet, but it's unlikely we'll see those funds. And I think that'll have a big impact on a lot of partners that we all work with. And then the staffing on the West Slope is very concerning. Think about all the federal agencies on the Western Slope: Bureau of Reclamation, Park Service, Forest Service, BLM, Fish and Wildlife Service, all partners that we all work with, really uncertain about what's happening to their staff. And I think I'm particularly concerned about wildfires this summer, not knowing what kind of resources we're gonna have. We're about to begin the recreation season for the summer, and Park Service, Forest Service camplands, BLM campgrounds, all the river, the Upper Colorado River is managed by the BLM. And those are, what happens when there's no rangers? What happens when there's always been a history of like things like fires getting started, and there's people there to put them out. And what if there's not? So just that's definitely top of mind for me right now, is what this summer is going to look like with just so much uncertainty and so much potential staffing being pulled back from working on the Western Slope and in our public lands. So with that, I will stop. Thanks.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? All right, we will go to San Juan, San Miguel, Dolores, Director Cloud.
Thank you. First, I just want to say welcome to our new board directors. I look forward to working with you, and I think it's going to be good over the next couple of years. So thank you. Thank you for stepping up into these positions. And also happy spring, everyone. It's a beautiful day, and I think spring is going to be a season that we are going to enjoy this year. So at least that's in what I'm thinking. But for my report, I just have a few things that I've been doing over the past couple of months. So on February 12th, I was the keynote speaker for the first annual Water Fellows convening, and that was hosted at the CSU Spur Hydro Center. And it's a group of students from all over the state of Colorado, different universities like CSU, CMU, Metro State, CU Boulder, and Denver, University of Denver, and a couple others. So that was actually a really good event, and that's something that also CWCB provides some funding for the Colorado Water Fellows. And then also I attended the IBCC meeting on February 26th virtually. And I just didn't want to have to drive, so I'm glad that there was a virtual option for that meeting. And then I also attended the Four Corners Water Center Confluence Seminar at Fort Lewis College, and that was a really good event. So if anybody ever gets a chance to visit Fort Lewis and their water center and attend any of their events that they have there, they have some really good speakers. They also have another organization that they partner with that is part of the Water Fellows and the Water Center, and that's with the Media Water Fellows Center. And so they create a lot of videos, they get some equipment, and they're able to create their own documents or documentaries and find ways to use media to get the word out about conservation. So it's really interesting of the products that they produce. And then on March 28th, next week, I will be attending the Southwest Conservation District. They will be hosting their 41st annual Southwest Water Seminar titled Water Reimagined and its Strategies for a Changing World. And this will be held at Skyette Casino Resort. So if anybody feels adventurous and wants to drive down to our beautiful area, come to the conference. I'm going to be on a panel called Women Shaping the Future of Water. So it's going to be a pretty dynamic conversation that we're going to be having. And then yesterday afternoon, I was on the Storyteller series for the Next 100 Colorado Conservationists. And that was a pretty interesting 1 hour interview of my life and what I do in water and what I see for the future. So then actually in the first part of April, I will be the keynote speaker for the Denver Law Seminar. And then at the end of April, I will be attending the Global Water Conference at University of Nebraska. And so if anybody gets a chance to look at some of that information that's out there, I think those are a good conference. From what I understand, the conference at University of Nebraska is a global conference. And so they're expecting people from all over the place coming for that conference. So should be pretty interesting, but it's all I have. So thank you again and welcome to our new directors.
Thank you, Director Cloud. Does anybody have any questions or comments? All right, thank you. I see Director McLeod was on, is he, okay, so we'll go to the Gunnison, Director McLeod.
Good morning, everyone. I have a brief report. I'm sorry I don't have a video this time, but maybe I'll get one ready for you next time. Our Gunnison Basin hydrology is declining a little bit. Right now, our snowpack is at about 91% of average. But we had a very dry fall, so we're not expecting to see a great runoff from that. The Bureau of Reclamation is forecasting that we'll get about 550,000 acre feet of inflow to Blue Mesa this year, which is 87% of average. So it will be an average dry year in the basin. At the Upper Gunnison District, we are preparing to do our measuring and sampling for the project that you saw yesterday, getting permissions from all of the landowners and water right owners to do the testing for that study. It's going very well. At the Gunnison Basin Roundtable on Monday, we were treated to the discussion of the Uncompahgre Valley Water Users Drought Management and Infrastructure Plan, which is a quite detailed planning exercise preparing the lower Gunnison Basin for a drought management. We also learned about the stakeholder meetings, as Jason told us yesterday, for our measurement rules, and we're excited to get started on that. And other than that, I have nothing to report.
All right, thank you, Director McLeod. Does anybody have any questions? North Platte, Director Vasquez.
Good morning. Will you be advancing the slides for me? Oh, thank you. Very much. Thank you. So I'd also like to welcome our new colleagues, Mike and Greg. And so wonderful to see you again, Taylor, and to work with you. I'm so glad you stepped up to do this. Yesterday, when Dan Gibbs was giving his DNR update, he mentioned a project up in the North Platte Basin, and I thought I'd share a little information about that project in that it is not something that came through our basin roundtable or basin action, because this ditch, Michigan Ditch, is owned by the city of Fort Collins, and it's in the State Forest State Park. So this first slide gives you a reminder what the basin looks like. The image on the right is a map of irrigated acreage back in 1940, which is a few years before the Supreme Court decision, Nebraska v. Wyoming, that defined the amount of water we could use in the headwaters of the North Platte in Colorado. So as a reminder, we, by the Supreme Court decision, which has been modified and supplemented several times, were allowed to irrigate an equivalent of 145,000 acres. We're allowed to store 17,000 acre feet per year, and that's an average. And then most importantly, the trans-basin diversion is capped at a 10-year rolling 60,000 acre feet per year. I've added some data that Aaron Light was kind enough to provide me for our basin from 2012 to 2022. And you can see, if you look in the second column, the irrigated acreage does not come close to what were allocated in that Supreme Court decision. And we're also constrained a little further than the 145 by the 3-state agreement for the ESA recovery at Platte, Nebraska. So that's 134,468, something like that. We're not hitting that either. But more importantly, point to the trans-basin. The column on the far right is the 10-year rolling total for 10 years. You see, we are not capping at the 60,000, but this is the only trans-basin diversion out of the North Platte. There are no others. A little bit about the Michigan Ditch. The picture on the right is a picture of Lake Agnes that I took maybe 5 years ago. There is no trail to where I took the picture from. Scrambling around to the west side of the lake, you can see the water flowing down the little canyon here into Lake Agnes. And at the far end is where the outflow is for the ditch. The water right was filed in 1903, and I don't think it's the oldest trans-basin diversion in the state, but it may be the second oldest behind the Grand. And you can read this later at your pleasure if you'd like, but it took a few years hand digging to get it completed, the 7 miles. It was eventually sold to Fort Collins, and they've been managing it since 1971. And the water flows out of the ditch up and over Cameron Pass and into Joe Wright Reservoir, which is in Larimer County. This is a Google Earth picture to give you an idea of topography and tree cover. Lake Agnes is the one at the little dark spot on the left. And I just want to point your attention. I don't have a pointer, but where the little red dot is saying Michigan Ditch Road, the ditch follows the road all the way out to crossing under Colorado 14 in the middle upper section of the photograph. So it supplies, I've seen figures earlier, 20 to 25% of Fort Collins water, and it's decreased over time. And when Fort Collins and the Colorado Forest Service made application for this wildfire ready project, they claimed it was 11%. So this is the project that Dan Gibbs mentioned. It's a collaboration between Fort Collins, the Colorado Forest, and is funded by COSWAP. And this picture on the left gives you an idea of the forest cover around the road. The ditch follows the road. And on the right, you can see the prescribed area in phase 1, where they plan to do quite a bit of service logging in order to protect the ditch from potential damage from wildfire and either landslide or debris fill in the ditch. And one of the interesting things about this project is because the slopes are so steep, almost 40, at least 40%, maybe up to 90% will be treated either by this tethered logging approach, where you want to make sure that your equipment doesn't slide down the hill. You can see the chain holding it up, or by helicopter logging, which we saw in Lauren's presentation yesterday. So that may be coming to North Park soon. That's the last slide I have. I would like to comment on a couple of other things. I was listening to a podcast this morning while I was exercising, and it was about financial risk, in the investment world. And I was amazed to hear a detailed discussion of estimating risk in people's portfolio and the bank's lending portfolio for water. And they cited a fact that just amazed me. I haven't done my homework to make sure that this is not disinformation, but they said that by 2030, globally, there will be a 40% deficit in fresh water. And this just, I was gobsmacked, right? And here we are working to try and protect and develop the waters of Colorado. And we all talk about drought and climate change. This is a bigger problem than some of the projects that we deal with here. It is just an enormous issue. And so I'm going to send that to you, Lauren, and you can share it with anybody that you'd like to, because I think that's really a challenging issue. One more thing about water, I sit on the Produced Water Consortium, which is also under DNR. ECMC finalized their first rulemaking for produced water. And I'm not speaking for the consortium, but for myself, we made recommendation to ECMC that they start at 4%, because 90% of the fresh water that's used in oil and gas completions or frac jobs is in the Front Range in the DJ Basin, and they don't have the infrastructure for recycling and reuse. So we started at the ECMC approved rules that start at a 4% statewide target of reused produced water for completions, and it steps up to 10% the next 4 years. While in the western slope in the Piceance Basin, the operators there are currently using over 90% reused water. And one of the reasons they've been able to do that, first it was driven by economics, but also one of the reasons they're able to do that is they have these enormous surface storage ponds, which you could never do in the Front Range. And there are issues with emissions from those ponds as well. So there's work that the consortium will be doing over the next 2 years to try and address basin-specific targets, so that we're not telling the Piceance 4% is good enough. They probably won't back off from what they're doing, but it is a statewide target. So that's the update on trying to reduce the amount of fresh water used in oil and gas operations. With that, thank you.
Thank you, Director Vasquez. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Director Wind.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to the new directors as well. It's an honor to have you on the board. Slide deck.
He has it.
There we go. So simple. Well, just a couple things I wanted to touch on today. One, since we're in the South Platte, I wanted to share with you kind of the utilization of a tool that's commonly used by many of us over probably well over a decade, that helps Director Ullman and many of his staff manage the South Platte. The main stem of the South Platte, in my view, provides a lot of transparency in how the river is administered and education for all of us. Like rivers in your basin, they all have their own personality and how they are administered, as well as how they operate. So I'm about to show you this tool called Visual South Platte. It's hosted by Lower South Platte Conservancy District, which has done the heavy lifting in putting this tool together. The data set comes from a lot of different locations from the state. USGS, Northern Water provides some of the data set as well to, again, help administer the river from essentially the release out of Chatfield on the south central Denver area to the Julesburg gauge. In this vicinity, there's probably about 750,000 irrigated acres, probably about 2.5 million people. So the tool itself, which can be found on Lower South Platte Conservancy District's website, it's called Visual South Platte. I'm showing here just kind of the top of the table and the bottom of the table. As I mentioned, it just essentially goes down the river to includes 48 diversion points that are all measured from the river. And again, this is the main stem. There are similar tools on a couple of the tributaries, the primary tributaries coming in the South Platte, but this is all the main stem. So it has 48 points in which water is extracted from the river. It has 13 gauges as you go down the river, embedded in with the table, and also 13 points of inflow, either from small creeks, tributaries to the South Platte, or from the few reservoirs that actually release back to the river to deliver water to their shareholders downstream. All told, there's about 220 miles from Chatfield to Julesburg, in which this table essentially covers. And row by row, there's either a gauge number or the extraction of water from a diversion point, or, as I mentioned, inflow into the main stem of the river. So as a consequence, the river is going up and down. And this time of year, Director Ullman, I think there's a few more days left to fill reservoirs on the main stem. And we're going through a little bit of a transition period of diverters going to much junior water rights and going to groundwater recharge on the main stem anyway. And we've probably got another few weeks before primary irrigation starts. But what's interesting about this data set is one can do some pretty simple mass balance and understand on a given day, given 30-minute time step on the river as to what the river is doing from essentially from top to bottom. And on this graph, which only goes from the Kersey gauge, which is a primary gauge just east of here, a couple miles, kind of after all the primary tributaries come to the South Platte to the Julesburg gauge, where the dark black line is the approximate flow, calculated flow in the river. It's not exact. It's again a mass balance looking at flow above and below every gauge, measured outflow. And what's fascinating about the South Platte, not totally unlike other rivers, is we're blessed to have an underlying alluvial water supply that drains back into the South Platte mile by mile, such that from the Denver area to Julesburg, there can be in any location 2 to 3 to 4 CFS per mile coming back into the river. And it's that return flow that really makes the river able to gain flows as you go from left to right, which is upstream to downstream. And as that black line increases from left to right, is that inflow that comes back and allows the river to, in some cases, be dried because of a senior water right, and then rejuvenate itself over the course of several miles, and then get diverted again. The big drops are generally, again, this time of year, diversions to reservoirs. The smaller ones are diversions going to groundwater recharge, which allows those augmentation companies to provide the subsequent accretions from that recharge for the operation of their wells generally within their service area. So that's again a key tool here in the South Platte that keeps everybody on the same page. I wanted to bring up a little bit centric to Northern Water. However, it's been news certainly in northeastern Colorado. A couple headlines here around what's called the NISP project, the Northern Integrated Supply Project, in which Northern Water settled with litigants in that the advancement of the NISP project. Northern Water, on behalf of the participants of that enterprise, which is 15 different cities and special water districts, have been advancing that project for about 20 years. About 15, 17 years have been in the permitting process. And once the federal permit was issued, there was a litigation as a questioning the legitimacy of the 404 permit for that project by Save the Pooter. In terms of who those participants are and how important it is to northeastern Colorado, there are 15 participants. This map, which kind of the lower left is the Boulder area, the northwest corner, Fort Collins and north, and then we do have some participants as far out east as Morgan County, but the various colored pieces are the participants in that project, which consist of these communities below and associated with their allocation of water from the NISP project, which at the end of the day, after full development, will yield about 40,000 acre feet per year of firm yield. So a few words about the settlement. It's been viewed by some as perhaps the largest settlement around environmental concerns of a project, perhaps in the West. I don't know if that's true or not. Lots of folks have spent a lot of money, good money on water, but it's a settlement between Save the Pooter and the enterprise of Northern Water that operates the NISP project of $100 million. That ultimately those funds go to the Pooter and agreed upon projects that are generally described in the settlement agreement between Northern Water and Save the Pooter. It's been kind of in the works over the course of a year and a half as that litigation's been rolling on. and good conversations, pauses from time to time, but allows for the NISP participants to contribute over the course of about 17 years. Uh, Funds that will flow from Northern Water. In fact, the first funds flowed to the Foundation of Northern Colorado, which will hold the funds. That happened this week of $5 million. There's another $5 million tranche that is committed once there's a notice to proceed by the contractor of Glade Reservoir, which is one of the two reservoirs that allow the project to operate and provide the yield. And then there's 7.5 million once the state engineer approves the dam's performance, and then $7.5 million every year thereafter until we get to $100 million. So it's not one single tranche, it's 17 over the years, and goes to the foundation. The way the settlement's structured and this document's public is there's a committee of 6 which are represented, 3 being from Northern Water, 3 being from Save the Pooter. And over the course of those years, there is envisioned to be applications by individuals or agencies, organizations that have passion around improving the Pooter. They serve those projects up to that committee. And if there's a vote of 4 or more among the 6, then that project gets funded and moves forward. So that's provided a green light for NISP to move forward. And we're hoping to finish up the design in the next year and a half or so. And then it'll be, the first step will be construction of Glade Reservoir, which is just northwest of Fort Collins, about 6 miles. So an important project to north central, northeastern Colorado and these participants. And Northern Water has been a huge advocate of this project, partly because absent developing these junior supplies, one of those water rights is from the Pooter, one is from the South Platte. Absent the development of this project, likely these communities and others would turn more heavily to agriculture for their next water supply. So that's all I have to report, Mr. Chair, and happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Director Wind. Anybody have any? Yes.
Thanks. Thank you, Director Wind. I'm just curious the kinds of projects you imagine might be funded by the settlement. Like what, have you thought about those kinds of projects and what are they?
Absolutely. Save the Pooter had a laundry list that they felt pretty passionate about, which have really been on their website for quite some time. They are typically, they're projects that are, I call them, and Save the Pooter kind of in the river. So it's not kind of up on the bench. It's not for irrigated ag. It's in the river. I envision a lot of them being related to fish passage through or around diversion structures, boat passage as well, improvements to water quality in the river. So although there's a list in the agreement, it doesn't have to be an exclusive list. Other things will come up over those years, but primarily think about the river channel as being improved.
Anybody else? On these projects, if there's, I think, is it a committee of 4 of the 6 have to approve the project in that regard, then is the project fully funded by this settlement, or is it a match, or is there any kind of description of that?
Yep, great question. My hope, our hope is, and I think Save the Pooter would feel the same way, that there's opportunities in which folks or municipalities, folks who have passion around the river would be advancing the application of a project, and there might be co-funding, some of it coming from this fund, some coming from other places. However, this fund could provide funding, the entire funding for a specific project on the river.
Thank you. I was just thinking that'd be a heck of an opportunity to leverage a lot of bigger projects. That would be,
Yeah.
I mean, anyway,
We hope that happens organically.
sure. Thank you. Okay, anybody else? All right, thank you, Director Wind. We're going to the Arkansas, Director Felt.
Wife went to school in Fort Collins and I lived up there for a year. And I have not been back to Fort Collins or Greeley since 1989 until this year. And now I've been up here 3 times already this year. One was the farm tour or farm show tour that we did during our last meeting. Another's this meeting, and another was I went to visit some friends, live up to the northwest of Fort Collins, and they're just west of the valley, the mouth of the valley where Glade Reservoir is going in. And we took a hike and checked it out, and I didn't say this to them, but I was thinking about Director Wind, and I was like, that is a pretty sweet spot for a reservoir. Like, just naturally, it's for an off channel. I was impressed. It's definitely, you guys have some amazing projects going on, and I'm glad you're finding a way to address some of the concerns. I also want to welcome our new members. Last meeting, I sort of lamented in some ways the departure of Jackie and Paul and Jessica. They've just been a big part of my experience on this board. But man, just after last night, really enjoyed hanging out and getting to know 2 that I don't know so well, and just really welcome you. And it's going to be great. So thanks for stepping up. We've been looking at a lot of snowpack reports, and I wanted to make a little distinction. It's a challenge we have on the Arkansas a lot, I think. You know, I don't have a slide, but you think of what the Arkansas Basin looks like, it's sort of like a bouquet. You've got this little stem part that kind of curves up to the North Lake and Chaffee counties, and then it just fans out to the east. And we've seen multiple snowpack percent of average SWE type maps, and you know the Arkansas is tracking at 76% or something like that. But it's interesting, that little stem of the bouquet is really right up in that upper Colorado type area, Blue, Eagle. It kind of sits up in that same zone. So the current snowpack for sort of, say, the Arkansas River from Salida upstream is actually about 106% as of a few days ago, which doesn't necessarily help all our lower basin agricultural interests, but we get, you know, a lot of people are interested in the river for recreation, fishery, and, you know, getting a lot of emails from people that are concerned, and it's actually looking pretty normal. It's also true that in a normal year, we get really critical and significant amounts of snow in March, April, and even May. Our big snows come from the east. They're upslopes that happen when cold air from Canada and Gulf air collide and sort of push back up the valleys, and they just dump a lot of snow as they climb. So that 106% may or may not persist, because even in a normal year, we have to get a lot of snow from here on out just to sort of break even. So we'll see what happens. But we're all, as we always do, there's projections for imports and projections for how much storage we need for that and how much space we have to retain in reservoirs for flood control, things like that. So there's a lot of kind of jockeying going on, I guess, in some ways, but also a lot of communication. And in the time that I've been paying attention and been involved in this type of stuff, I'm really struck by the amount of communication that is going on these days on a variety of topics. But I think sort of the best outcomes are being advanced because of that. And I guess that shouldn't come as a surprise, but you know, I find I'm new. Obviously, I'm 2.5 months into this new job running a water conservancy district, but the 3 other water conservancy district directors in our basin for the Purgatoire, the Southeastern, and Lower Arc, we're getting on the Zoom every month and having these great conversations. They're all relatively new, Jack Gobel's been at his job maybe 3 years. The rest of us are all in the last year. And it's been some great camaraderie. In some of our meetings, we don't even talk about water, honestly. We're managing people and stuff. But, that's going on. And Sean Cronin has started a group of Conservancy district managers statewide that are communicating regularly that I think is also just a really like an obvious thing to do, but the time, I guess, is right for that to go on. More locally on the Arkansas, I've talked a number of times in the past about our what we call the voluntary flow management program. And the basic gist of that is it's a FRIARC project program. FRIARC project is Turquoise or parts of Turquoise and Twin Lakes, Pueblo Reservoir, and now the Arkansas Valley Conduit. Also Rudeye Reservoir on the west slope and the Boosted Tunnel that brings the water across. So there's a lot of water that comes into our basin at the very top end up at Turquoise, and it has no, that water has no debt to the Arkansas, right? It's not part of the prior appropriation system. It's fully consumable water that is outside of that sort of priority management and administration of water rights. So it's very flexible, it's very valuable to us, and we try to make really good use of it, not just consuming every drop, but also using it in non-consumptive ways, non-consumptively beneficial ways. And one of the things we are able to do, in part because we have Pueblo Reservoir as sort of a terminal reservoir, as a recapturing point, is to hold water upstream in Turquoise and Twin from the year before often, and then release it down to Pueblo at times that benefit recreation. So we generally release at least 10,000 acre feet between July 1st and August 15th to kind of maintain a base flow for river recreation. Really important for the economy, really important for our quality of life. We also, in the spring, have another component on the flow program, which often involves reducing flows in the river. And the reason for that is our brown trout fry emerge from the nests from the spawning, they spawn in the fall, eggs incubate all winter and into the spring. And then by mid-April or so, we start seeing the brown trout fry emerging. They are very vulnerable to predation. They're very vulnerable just to the sort of the forces of the river environment, and they need to get established in sort of safe harbors to get through the high water that comes in late May and June. And so we also, for our established fish population, they've come through a long winter. They survive that fine, but they don't prosper during the winter. There's not a lot of available food. The water's really cold. Their metabolisms are depressed, so to speak. They don't eat a lot. But as spring comes and the river starts warming up, we get these amazing surges of aquatic entomology and bugs that are going through parts of their life cycle, often emerging, hatching, as we call it in fly fishing, and going through their reproductive process. And so it's also important for not just the emerging fry, but also for the entomology that flows remain pretty low in the spring, both to create an environment that's supportive of reproduction, but also because some of these reproductive cycles are water temperature driven. So if you have too much water in the river at the wrong time in the spring, flows tend to be colder and you may not get the hatch and reproduction that you need. You can lose not just a one-year life cycle, but you can actually crash a population, which has happened in the past. So those pulses of food combined with warming water that kind of turn up a fish's metabolism means that the fish need to eat, and we need to have food for them so that they can put on the weight they need to survive the high water period and then be ready to take advantage of the summer. So it's an interesting thing built into the flow program for years, 20, 25 years, have been kind of regular meetings in the summer amongst the water management community to try and try and make the best decisions possible. Sometimes other entities besides Southeastern and the Bureau will contribute water to the flow program and make it a success. So there's a lot of coordination that goes on. Something we started in 2009, it's been a while, is kind of monthly to bi-weekly calls amongst the water management community to try and achieve the spring fishery flows too. And that has turned out to be a really fascinating thing. You would think that big entities like Colorado Springs Utilities, Pueblo Board of Waterworks, Aurora, Bureau of Reclamation, Southeastern, that they would all talk to each other all the time, right? Like, I just imagine sort of daily, what are you guys doing? No, historically, they didn't really talk to each other much at all. They play their cards really tight. And because in the absence of communication and better relationships, I think people tended to be a little more suspicious and cynical and maybe felt vulnerable, wanted to protect their interests. But through these two programs, the summer recreation and the spring fishery, and I think especially the spring fishery, had these amazing conversations. They're going on every 2 weeks now. And everyone's talking about what they need to do or want to do. And we found so many opportunities that, oh, you want your water to go that way, we want our water to go that way. Like, hey, this is a lot simpler than it sounds. It's been just remarkable to sit in on those conversations and let the big players work on it, and then just be there to kind of remind them, like, here's the goal, this is all figured out through biology. It's as factual as it can be. These are the stated goals, and just helping them remember what we're trying to do and make progress. So I just I wanted to share that because it's been this communication that's going on these days, at least in my life. It just feels like people are, even though there are a lot of challenges and there's a lot to worry about right now, a lot of uncertainty, there also does seem to be a real kind of, I don't know what the word would be, congeniality or something. Just people are maybe taking a little extra effort to be kind and friendly and to, and maybe in some ways avoid conflicts that they worry could be out there. And I'm just seeing people really focus a lot on what can we do, what's within our power, and the results I feel like are speaking for themselves. So guess there's always that silver lining. That's always opportunities for growth and improvement in adversity, and it's good for us all to always keep that in mind. So I think I'll conclude there. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Phelps. Does anybody have any questions? No? Denver, right? Director Johnson, I guess we had to call you, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just first of all, I wanted to say thank you for all the warm welcomes. I could not be more honestly honored and grateful and frankly just excited to be here. I've been joking with folks kind of like I'm the bad penny who just keeps showing up. I honestly had never thought I would end up in this position, kind of at the grown-up table, as it were. I'm also the weirdo, if you will. I was at CWCB for 5 years, left for a few years, did consulting, came back, went to Denver Water, which I truly love. And now, to be back on the board, again, it really is just such an honor. Sounds corny, but I truly love this agency, the work that we do, the people. It's just, again, it's something that for me is win-win. It's wonderful to have my day job, deeply fascinating, love Denver Water as an organization. This seat, I've talked a lot to Jessica. I've tried to prep as much as I can. One of the things that we talked about is how this seat is really interesting, from the original statute, but being carved out, obviously not really a basin seat, predates the roundtable process even, really just explicitly being the city and county. Denver Water certainly makes sense. Of course, Director Biggs, Barbara Biggs, she rest in peace. But with Metro Wastewater Reclamation at the time, was a board member for quite a while. Had the pleasure of working with her. But to me, it's interesting to be able to be in this seat and do everything I can to step up, but to bring that kind of explicit municipal perspective when and how I can, but still, of course, to wear that statewide hat. And that's something that I think more than anything is what I truly love about the CWCB and having that privilege to wear the statewide hat, to work on so many different diverse issues, so many different diverse stakeholders, just across the state and sometimes beyond. So anyways, just wanted to put that out there. That's just a little introduction, and just again, I couldn't be more excited to be here. I'll keep it relatively short today. I do not have slides. Director Haas set the bar high as my fellow new board member, and Director Camlin shortly after me here. We, of course, are tracking snowpack levels very closely, as we always do, our reservoir storage levels. Things could be a lot better, could be a lot worse, but it's going to be an interesting year, along with all the other uncertainty that we're seeing. Again, talking to Director Brody, also Director Wells, and I need to circle back with her. I had the privilege of working with Director Wells for many years as well. I don't want to repeat too many things, so I've been doing what I can to go back through some of the previous director's reports. So all that to say, I don't want to hit you with the same updates on some of our big capital projects, lead reduction program, our new treatment plant, things like that. But I'm all ears if there are certain things you want to hear about. One thing that came to mind, thanks to Director Vasquez, when you were mentioning kind of some of the risk in investing with regards to water, one of the things that I'm very lucky to do is to work with our climate adaptation and mitigation program. And we were involved, not myself directly, but Taylor Winchell, who I work with, who's amazing, who runs our climate program. And then our CFO, our Chief Financial Officer, Angela Brickmont, were for the last couple of years involved in a group that was called the EPA Climate Finance Risk Work Group. And it involved a lot of folks from the water utility industry, from the bond industry, from the insurance industry, but really looking at the complexity of how climate is impacting everything that we do in the water supply industry. And it's fascinating. It's sobering. There's a lot that goes into that. It was new to me working for a water utility, but just the depth of things that go into issuing bonds and what's called the preliminary official statement and all the disclosures that are required through federal law, through Federal Securities and Exchange Commission and everything else. So increasingly, climate is becoming a big part of that. And so that, of course, factors very heavily into everything that we do every day, but with especially our mid and our long range planning. So that's one example of something I could lean in more on in the future. But yeah, all sorts of different things. And again, I'm all ears on what you would like to hear. And then wanted to express gratitude. We have a couple things on this meeting. Nothing directly for Denver Water, the city and county, but we are partnering on a couple grant projects. So that North Forks sediment stabilization project, we're really excited about. That's just upstream of Strontia Springs Reservoir. We have had sedimentation issues there from some of the fires, 20 plus years ago, Buffalo Creek and whatnot. So excited about that. And then we've been a big supporter, not to our climate program specifically, but to kind of all things with regard to our monitoring and our surveys, but the airborne snow observatory work. So we've got that coming up here in just a little bit, where we are partnering with the city of Aurora. So super grateful that they are stepping in, but to do some inaugural flights up in the upper South Platte. So just want to express gratitude for that. And I believe that's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Johnson. Any questions? All right, appreciate it. Too. All right, we'll go on to the Rio Grande. Can I get the clicker? While we're starting here, I'll tell you, is also able to go to the IBCC meeting, and I think one of the things I hope everyone heard there was Director Risk gave them a challenge to not be afraid to maybe redefine themselves as the IBCC and become more relevant in their role, helping the state and CWCB. So I think Director Mitchell gave a great report of them wanting to step up and do more work, but that was that was encouraging to hear from Director Ist to say that you step out there and define yourselves. Don't be afraid or don't ask permission to do good work. Within the basin on April 25th, we'll have the Rio Grande Compact meeting. We'll be in Colorado this year. It's in Alamosa. It moves around annually from Colorado to New Mexico to Texas. I'm not going to lie to you, the trip to El Paso is much more, it's just way better than just driving to Alamosa, but you're welcome to come if you'd like. We'll have a reception the night before and do some things like that. Also, March 29th is the Rio Grande Basin Symposium, hosted by the Salazar Institute there at Adams State University. That will be all day Saturday. The author of the Emerald Mile, Kevin Dark, yeah, he'll be the keynote speaker. So we're really looking forward to that. So thank you, Director House. In March, our roundtable we try to set some themes for what we're doing. And in March, we were doing forecasting. And so a lot of our tours, a lot of our agenda is based on that. So this last meeting, we had Carl Wetlaufer from NRCS come and talk about a lot of how the SNOTEL forecasting is improving and going. And then it just started a discussion of integrating with the ASO flights and what we do there. And so it was a really good it was a high level roundtable. This next month in April is going to be obviously the compact. So we're going to be hitting a lot of our compact stations there all the way through the basin and through Colorado. So a big shout out to Cassandra McEwen, who's heading up a lot of those tours. She is doing a fantastic job of getting people involved and taking us to relevant places within our basin. And I think it's keeping that roundtable really vibrant. I was going to talk a little bit when Director Felt was talking about the fish. One thing, I'm not a fisherman. In high school, I thought I was. Didn't win any awards. But the one thing I do know about fish is they need water. That's about it. So we teamed up about 8 years ago, the Kness Water Conservancy District with Trout Unlimited. And we began a program. Our brown trout were struggling in the winter for the same reason, but it was because of low flows. The minimum flow out of our reservoir wasn't sufficient to maintain those nests and the gravel bars and stuff. And so Trout Unlimited brought in Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and we began doing some exchanges to bring some water into Plateau during the summer. And then during the winter, we would meter that water out, which would increase the flows on the river. But the benefit was, okay, let me back up. When the Kness Water Conservancy District bought Plateau Reservoir, there was a lot of infighting between the agencies and the entities and you can imagine. And so our board had a pretty bad taste in their mouth of working with anybody. They kind of became an island to themselves and put the sharp pointy sticks facing out. And so it took a lot to start down this discussion. Kevin Terry with Trout Unlimited, like I said, he came in, we had a lot of discussions, and we started this plan. CPW stepped up as a huge partner to provide this water that we exchanged. And then in the winter, we would increase the flows on the canal system down through and the benefit to our district was it cost us no more to regulate the water. Whether I set the gates at 10 CFS or 12 CFS is irrelevant. It's just a number. But what it did for the fisheries was improve the hatching and the catch rate. But it also kept that whole corridor alive, and it paid compact for the Kness, which the compact on the Kness is a very, very steep target to hit. So anything we get was a benefit. So we got this whole altruistic operation working. Yesterday, one of the grants that we approved for the Rio Grande Reservoir for that flow is so that they can begin participating in a program like this. So what we're trying to do is get all of the plumbing in the Rio Grande Basin connected, right? I mean, we have the connections through the rivers, through the channels, but now just to Greg's point of talking and discussing, now we're trying to get the plumbing administratively connected where we can begin doing more things. And in fact, this year, we are gonna have not a good year. So let me just show you a map here. There's another Trout Unlimited program I'm gonna talk about. The two orange dots in the middle there that are up and down, the lower one is our Cumbers Trestle, right on the state line. That's the low end of our basin for the Conejo system. And then that upper orange below the two X's, that's our Lily Pond. That's just above Plateau Reservoir. So those are in reference of what we're going to be looking at. What's happening this year is we are looking at a really not good year. Cumbers Trestle, the one down by the state line, if you look at the top, it's at elevation 10,030, which is what we consider some of our low snow. The black obviously is where we are. The red line that's highlighted there is, that is 2018, our third worst year ever in the Kinetic system. So we are finally up to the third worst year at that Snowtail site, which we're grateful we're that high right now. You look at how far away we are from average though at the green line well above. This is not to contradict what Director Ullman said. As a basin, we are at 71%, but he also did a good job of showing that from north to south, it's significantly different in our basin this year. And this is that far south. We're at 2018. But something interesting, this is kind of busy. This is the Lily Pond. Look at that elevation is 11,000. This is one of our highest Snowtail sites that we have in the basin to measure. We're way off. The green line that's below the black line, if you look real close, that's 2002, worst ever. Not second or third worst, the worst. And we just intersected that at Lily Pond. So what this tells us though is that for those of us trying to manage water, we're going to have a decent early run out. I say decent compared to 2018. Our early water will go, but this elevation is all of our late May and June supply. And so what's going to happen is we are going to struggle for the last part of our year from the middle to the end. And then what's our plan? So I bring that up to explain this next program we're trying to work with Trout Unlimited and of course CPW. Conservancy District, we can store water for our irrigators, or the Conservancy District itself has a water right where we can store according to the compact under certain conditions. That water that the district owns is called project water. When we release that water, there's some caveats to it. If river losses are too high, we suspend releases because of the compact, it is very difficult for the district to exercise their storage decree. And so that water is almost gold. So we're very, very stingy of how we let it go out. And we don't just release it to go into oblivion. We're looking at a year right now where we think that 35% loss trigger is going to hit later in the year. So our irrigators couldn't actually call for their allocation. That's going to be very detrimental to the river as a whole, as you can imagine. In the hottest part, looking at suspending water in a river. And like I said, the one thing I know about fish is they do need some water. So Trout Unlimited and CPW and we got together, and it looks like what we can try to do this year is CPW is going to put some of their water towards conveyance to help keep us out of that 35% threshold, which will then allow another 9,000 acre feet of allocation to be used during the summer. We hope we can pull this off. This is a pilot program to see if we can make this river work. In 2018, we had to shut off the river. In 2002, we shut off the river. So we're trying to avoid some of those issues. And I guess the reason I bring that up is, as Director Felt was talking about the collaboration. Back in the day when I told you we had all of our pointy sticks facing outward, so did every other conservancy district. Everyone was trying to defend and to build their territory. Now that those barriers are breaking down, I see there's a lot of good and a lot of opportunity to work with entities. Another thing I like I said, one thing I do know about water, I thought I knew about water, is it was for irrigating, and the rest of you could do the best you could as it passed your head gates, you know? And so I had to do a lot of learning and understanding that it wasn't mutually exclusive to work with Trout Unlimited or CPW or any other entity, and then get that water down to our irrigators. And that was a long, hard roll of breaking down a lot of mental barriers that we had. But I think we're going to see some benefits. This will. I showed you this last time. We're starting a whole new program because the CNES, in 2015, we started as the CNES looking at better ways of forecasting. Our compact on the Rio Grande is very dependent on a forecasted amount. Others have calls, they have set amounts. We have to give a percentage of what we think we're going to have before it's actually realized itself. So an error in forecast can be very critical to us. This right here, if you look at the date, was from January of 2025. What we did is we've built the thing off of the radar that CWCB had a huge portion of helping us build that. And we built that radar and we're starting to build modeling. And if you look at that, each one of those are sub drainages within the Conneaus Basin. What we're able to do is develop the SWE in inches, but then approximate that to how many acre feet are within that drainage. So this was what we had in January 21st of 2025. We thought we had 106,000 acre feet up there. This is what we just did on our last storm. We're up to 149,000, which that's only 59.8% within the basin. So keep in mind, we are gaining. A caveat, this only can measure accumulation. We don't have a way yet of compensating for sublimation or wind movement, but it gives us one more tool to see how much we actually can expect out of each of our tributaries. The way that helps me is if you look at the dark blue in the elevation, the top right or the very top center, that orange is Lily Pond, the bottom orange is Cumbers Trestle. And so you see we're relative to within our basin. Most of that blue area, the dark blue, is in wilderness. So there's not a snow tail, there's not a snow course, there's very little we're going to be able to do to measure that. And I know you guys all admire my physique, but I don't snowshoe through that country. It's not accessible. So we had to find another way. And that was using radar and LiDAR to build a whole new system to measure snow. So we'll be doing flights here the end of March to then verify and ground truth this. And as you can see, that's why that House Bill 1115 is so essential. It helps us stay where we need to be on our snowpack dependency. We're seeing a slight increase. We're going to put measuring gauges on each of our tributaries out of those subbasins, because now we can tell people, look, the heat is we're seeing melt at these elevations. This is what you can expect because we know how many acre feet are in those sub drainages. So our forecasting ability, as the state goes, they need a calendar year. As a water manager, I need to know weekly or biweekly what to tell our irrigators what's coming. This is just how we calculate that. Each of those sub drainages that you see, the 1 through 13 over there, tells us where we are and how we develop that. I don't know why I put that one in. You don't need to know that one, but you're welcome. So finally, our last couple of meetings, it's been interesting. We've talked a lot about kind of mental well-being and just being healthy in that way. And for me personally, I don't think it was coincidental when you look at those things that I've listed there on the side of, we're looking at another year of extremely low commodity prices. As you can see, volatile long-term precipitation forecasts as everyone is hit all week. The federal funding unknowns, that's something that's not leaving any of us alone, right? There's all these commonalities. And then within each of our communities and personal lives, there's always a difficulty coming, or we're overcoming, or we're dealing with personally right now. So I think what we need to do is, as I talk about breaking down barriers in the water world, conservancy district to conservancy district, roundtable to roundtable, so whatever it is, as we start breaking those down, I think we also need to do it as people and just pay attention as best we can to the others around us, and just realize everybody's dealing with something. Even though you may have something on a plan figured out, they may not have a plan, and it's okay to just be a little more compassionate and kind, and just end with everybody with, hope you have a great weekend coming up with Easter and everything else. And that's the end of my report. Any questions? Oh, Director Vasquez.
Yeah, thanks for all that on the LiDAR and the radar. But my question is soil moisture. I believe you're doing some measurement as well. And do you have models that you can integrate that information yet?
I appreciate you bringing that up. When Carl Whitlaufer was there at our roundtable, we're mostly using NRCS's soil moisture. They're adding it to their snowtail sites. We are doing some down in the valley, trying to get some. We don't know where it's going to take us right now. We were very, okay, so I gave you the big crybaby about our snowpack, but we did have a great fall. And so our soil moisture is higher than average. So what is up there, we expect to be realized in the river. So we're still working on that because we're not sure how it's going to fit into our forecasting yet, but it is still on the table of what we're trying to do.
on the percentage of average that is calculated using the snow queue? Is that based upon, because you have, snow queue produces a volumetric amount of water that's there. The snow-tell stations produce in inches of water that are each station. Are they comparing what would have been assumed using the snow-tell stations, the volume, or what ran off in the stream from the Caneos? Determine what percentage of average they're saying that is.
So as a caveat, we still use the NRCS and the National Weather Service as the official forecast is what, what Craig uses there in the
Mhm.
basin. And so what we're doing is just trying to build comparisons. This is only the second year we've modeled this. So what we've done is taken it off of our historical average of what has actually reached the river and compared it to what we're measuring in acre feet. But without a sublimation and without wind thing, it is not accurate as far as what we're trying to compare to the forecast that DWR is putting out.
Okay.
We're trying to look at, is there a future in this tool? And if we can build our own line of data, then we can start comparing it to what the National Weather Service and NRCS's forecast is. So this right here is simply, those numbers are based on the Caneos only, not its tributaries of the San Antonio and the Los Pinos, of realizing 250,000 acre feet compared to what we're showing there. It is the most basic calculation just to check an efficiency,
Okay.
if that mattered. I mean,
Thanks.
yeah. Anybody else? All been waiting for. So,
Last but not least, huh? I'm not as ambitious as Taylor in some of these. I'm gonna follow Greg's lead a little bit and to be honest with you, I'm not gonna talk a lot about water either, because whether you know it or not, you can drown in water. And after yesterday, I'm gasping for air. So I think most of you guys know me, from the Mayville Irrigation District. They put me on that board in April of 1999. It was my very first meeting, and they see me coming, and so they put me on the board, and that's a volunteer position, and I did that for almost 25 years. But I learned a lot. I was new and naive. What's interesting about water is you can, be in it 25 years and still learn something daily on it. So it's a study of mine that I really enjoy, and I think that's why I'm sitting here. And I always try to surround myself with good people, and I'm very pleased with the people that are sitting on this board. I think a lot of passion, a lot of heart here. So I'm happy with sitting on the board. So most of you also know that I ranch, and one of the things that kind of concerns me a little bit about this year is, in the Ample White Green, as far as snowpack, we're not off that far as numbers or whatever, but on the ranch, we're way off. And so Dan and I watch our precipitation very closely, and maybe that'll be a future slideshow for you guys, the technology we use to watch that and how we measure that and so forth. But, I make my money off of grass, and if it doesn't grow, it affects my bottom line. And so it's concerning this year. Time will tell. I keep my fingers crossed, because March and April are our biggest moisture months, and I haven't quite figured out the snow dance or the rain dance yet, but maybe someday. Other than that, I think I wanted to talk about some of the other boards, and you'll probably hear me, in the future talk about, I sit on the Colorado Cattlemen's Board, and that is one of my favorite boards. And the water committee that we have is actually one of the most attended committee meetings that we have. Water is very important in ag, because it is, it affects their bottom line. And so And the other thing that I've learned from that, and the same with this board, is, I'll be dealing with state issues that I've discovered, the ag community thinks differently in different parts of the state, policies that maybe in our area or don't align with other basins. And so I've got a lot to learn there. But I'm going to take advantage of the relationships I have throughout the state to make sure that I make some good decisions on this board. Other than that, I think I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I would like to give maybe a few fun facts, so to speak. One of the things that my wife and I have done for years and love to do, so I don't vacation. You won't find me on the beach very often. But what we do try to budget some time and some money every year for continued education. And so my wife and I usually go somewhere a couple of times a year for continued education, whether that's a finance class, a succession class. We went to Australia for a marketing class. Matter of fact, we went to Orange Beach this year for a strategy class. And actually I didn't hang out on the beach very often, but it was interesting. So that's kind of one of my passions, is always to, continued education. I was talking about it at breakfast. I took a class on staying in the zone. And this guy taught Olympians or whatever. And so that was really interesting. So a wide variety of things as far as education goes. The other fun fact, and some of you may know this, that, everybody looks at me as this great big huge rancher guy or whatever, but if you follow me around the ranch, there's usually a corgi dog or two that is not too far behind me. And I love my corgis. They might be short and sweet, but they're actually very athletic dogs, and they pack a ton of comedy in them, and they just make my day. And so that's my other fun fact. With that, I regress.
Thank you, Director Kevin. Anybody have questions? Take our break, and we'll come back at 5 after. Oh, wait, this is a 15-minute break, huh? We'll come at 10 after. To stay on schedule, we'll come back at 10:15. Thank you. Get started again here. We're going to begin here with agenda item 18. Mr. Kirk.
Thank you. Good morning. Kirk Russell, Finance Section Chief, and I'll be presenting agenda item 18. Pull it up on my screen to make sure I follow through here. And before I do so, I want to welcome the new board members. Thank you for taking this on, and it'll be great to get to know you over the course of your spot on the board. But I wanted to maybe air some dirty laundry here before I get started. So as it's been presented, Director Johnson was part of CWCB back in the day. And there's, I don't hide my feelings. And Director Johnson left not just once, but twice from CWCB's staff, AKA family. And I tend to voice my opinion when folks do that. And so I have to apologize to Director Johnson, because now he's going to accept my recommendations and probably question them in great detail as a result. So, but welcome aboard. Thank you for joining us. Okay, the agenda item 18 is the routine business of the finance section. And I would like that PD. Oh, I'm supposed to put that on there. Oh, thank you. Okay, the Viola sent out this morning the 2-page report that I presented each board meeting, and I adjust this as we go, and it's somewhat of a tracking sheet to see where we are on projections and where we are on current money coming in and out. And after you see this about 3 or 4 times, it'll start making sense. But in general, this is not an action item. Item 18 is not an action. This is routine, and it is board meeting number 5 out of 6, which you'd think we were on autopilot until you heard the news a couple days ago that the projection for severance tax went from, and the money that we get from severance tax is about 47, the projection was 47 million 3 days ago. 2 days ago, it's 0. And so I want to give the board assurance that we prepare for this kind of thing. This is not the first time we've seen such a dramatic shift. We got hit back in the early pandemic year when production of oil and gas tanked as a result, I think, of a lot of us staying home. I shouldn't profess to know why and how severance tax flows, but we also experienced a couple of years ago a projection of 20 million. We ended up with 90 million. So the perpetual base fund for the severance tax is able to handle these kind of things. And you'll hear me talk about, we have this much available for new loans, and there's usually a pretty good sized buffer. And I really like to push us into a negative when I talk about new loans, if I can, because money sits in the treasury on very large projects for quite some time. And so that allows us to really work well with this fluctuating graph that I'll show you in a second. But the first page of the report is the construction fund, which is much more stable. At least traditionally it's been that. The revenue comes in pretty consistent from federal mineral lease. It runs about, that's in row 4 there. And you see under projections, that's fairly common, about $11 million each year. And then under current, you see the current number 2 out of 4 installments. We get those quarterly. And so again, under projections, that's the latest projection, the greatest information we have at the time that I present this, and the stuff on the right comes from our accountant, Mimi Winter, as money comes in from loans and repayment and expenses that go out and things like that. But understand, under projections, that I like to use whatever this board has promised somebody. Unfortunately, there's a lot of other ways to look at our funds, such as, well, you haven't contracted for it yet, or it actually hasn't gone out the door yet. And so I use the most conservative approach. I look at what this board has authorized, not only in new loans, but also in projects bill items, things that are in statute. So it's a very conservative approach. And you see my goal at the bottom of that first page of a end fiscal year balance of 11.2. I work to a number that matches about our operations. It's interesting. I'm most focused on making sure we have the lights on and pay staff at CWCB. So I use that 11 million number at the end of the year to make sure we start next year with enough money for that. The highlight, I've got that 17.9 million plus the 11 million. I've got the red 11 million highlighted because there is a proposal to, this is before a lot of the activities with severance tax changed. That was a proposal to sweep $11 million of the treasury interest out of the construction fund. It's somewhat rare that the construction fund gets pulled into the balance, the budget balancing activities, but that's right now a question mark whether we will get to keep that 11 million of severance tax interest. I think I shared with the board in a previous conversation that the sweeping of interest, they did not focus on loans and repayment interest, but the interest that's in treasury as the money sits there waiting to go out to be dispersed. That is generating interest, and that 11 million had a bullseye on it to maybe help with the Tabor impact issue that the budget folks are dealing with. And I was hoping that Nate would be here to answer some of the complicated questions you might have. Oh, very good. Thank you, Nate, for joining us online. Other than that, you'll notice, and this is somewhat of a new addition, you see the caret online, the little less than sign on row 13 that shows in May board meeting. Technically, I use that to say we've got $2 million in this fund to hit my target of 11 million at the bottom. So when we start the board meeting year, that caret will be up high and it'll be a larger number, and it dwindles as the projections allow. I think when I speak to you in May, could be a whole different scenario if things changed on that 11 million coming in. We actually might end up negative if they take that 11 again, I assure you that we've got a lot of money sitting in there waiting to be dispersed. We'll catch up before there's any trouble with that. So I will go to the second page of this, which is the severance tax. Same conversation. We got two funds. Construction fund deals with operations, a lot of our projects bill activities. The severance tax is primarily focused on loaning money. So we get, and I'll show you the graph, but we get this bouncing revenue stream coming in, and then we convert it into interest payments from borrowers and the treasury, so it stabilizes that up and down. So on the second page, the cash from severance tax revenues, the highlight is that March projection. It was 47, that red number 0. It was 47 last time I presented, now it's 0. And subsequently, since I produced this, I learned that the 13 million that has already come in, and those come in monthly from the Treasury for severance tax revenues, we get those, and I keep track each meeting. We haven't received one since, I want to say, for 4 or 5 months. So we knew there was something funky going on, but they've indicated that that 13 million will be swept back out and likely be a 0 at the end of the year. And so I'll correct that for the next board meeting, but that will be reduced to 0. Again, if you look at the caret in row 14, my projection for the next board meeting, even with that 0, that red 0 from revenue, I still have 30 million available for loans in May. And again, that's to keep us at that bottom balance number of close to 0. And indications from Matt Stearns, I think we've got 3 pretty good sized loans coming in May that we may actually take that down, that full 30 million down to 0 and maybe a little more. So, which is good. We've got, again, a lot of money sitting in there in Treasury that likely will not go out the door for multiple years. I keep reminding the board, last year's projects bill included a Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District loan for 100 million. A lot of uncertainty of yet when that will be contracted, and Northern will come back to us to indicate exactly which component of that 2+ billion dollar project that we would be applying that loan to. So we got a lot of controls in place to make sure that we don't get in trouble. Okay, with any questions on those reports? And then I want to show you.
This may be something you would defer to somebody else, but I haven't been following. Why is severance tax 0? What is this repayment to oil and gas operators? I don't understand.
When you're referring to that 13 million that I said gets taken back out of our account, back into the Treasury, it is my understanding that there is the revenue from the oil and gas producers, which is like 97% of severance tax revenue. They get a credit, an ad valorem tax credit. And when it's almost like a lag of 2 years, I want to say, where they get a credit for the high production year. And then all of a sudden there's less production. So the credit goes back to the producer, and therefore less revenue comes into CWCB. So all of a sudden now they're pulling back money to make those offsets back to the producers. That could have made a mess of what reality is, but that's how I understand it.
Thanks a lot.
Nate, did you want to say something?
Yeah, do you mind if I jump in? I think everything Kirk just said there, accurate. First of all, sorry not to be there in person today. Had some car trouble this morning, ended up at the auto shop and back in the office in Denver. So wish I was there. Anyway, so Kirk is right about why we're having this rapid decrease in expected severance tax revenue this year. As far as Director Vasquez, your comment on revenue that's already come into the fund being swept out, I think that's really like a cash flow issue. So oil and gas producers are paying estimated tax throughout the year, and that's being distributed into our account, but they are truing up their tax liability. Usually that happens in April, and they're, as Kirk mentioned, they're able to claim some pretty large deductions based on local taxes that they've paid. And so while they've been paying estimated taxes throughout the year, they're chewing things up here. They're claiming some pretty large refunds from the state. And so it's unfortunate sort of the way money flows, that we've got money in the account that may need to go back out. But I think that the way oil and gas companies are sort of truing up or finalizing their tax liability for the year is why that might be happening. And then, yeah, sort of co-sign Kirk's explanation of why there are the refunds to begin with. It's based on a 2-year lag of local property tax paid by the oil and gas operators.
Thanks very much, Nate.
And I probably should not have used the word swept. I should have used clawback. It's just.
Yeah,
used
I
the word
agree, Kirk. Clawback in this situation works.
It's just a correction of the revenue flow that needs to get returned. So
And
any other questions on the reports? Okay, I wanted to show the board, and I guess the ability to predict or project severance tax revenue must be an awful job to try to figure out what's going on because of some of the experiences that I've had in my 20 years with CWCB. But what I wanted to show you is a little bit of somewhat of an animation of severance tax. And so what you have on the left side is millions of dollars, and this is 25% of the total pie of revenue that comes in for severance tax. The perpetual base fund, the one that we work loan program out of, is 25% of the total amount. The number on the left side is the amount that we received over the years. And this goes back to 1998 in the far left, when we got 7, 8, 9 million the first few years into the perpetual base. And then you can see it just skyrocketing in 2009 and had some peaks and valleys as you continue through there. And then as I shared back in 2021, you see the low number where I think we went from a projection of maybe 40, 50 million back then and went to zero. And then you see skyrocketing couple years all the way up to 76 million. And let's see, last year, 43 million. And I wanted to share with you that because I can't work with this up and down when I propose we use a budget for projects bill grants and non-reimbursables and things that don't come back into loans, I use a 10-year average, and that's what that dashed red line is. It just stabilizes things, and it seems to have worked for about the last 10 plus years for me to use a 10-year average. But what's interesting, if you focus on it would be the last dark red line on the right side, and this was what you're seeing is the forecast from December of 24. If I advance to March of 25, the recent number, you can see that dropped to zero, but as you can imagine, 10-year average will accept that. You see a little bit of drop in that. The projections out 2 more years seem to be up around that 50 million number. And so if everything is as predicted, it'll come back up. And so I just wanted to share with you the dramatic look, but spread out over the last many years, 25 years, it's understandable. We've seen this happen before. So this is a picture of what comes into the loan program as a whole, not just the severance tax, but also the construction fund. Same kind of analysis, and we talk about this more at the finance committee, but I thought it might help the new board members better understand. The blue line, or the left side, is millions of dollars coming into the loan program. That's CWCB's construction fund and severance tax. And the bottom is the last 10 years. And so again, this is December of 24's projection. The blue line at the bottom is federal mineral lease. I said is fairly consistent. You see a little bit of bump in there one year, but that's fairly common, about that 10 to 14 million. The green line is our interest earnings in the fund globally, both funds together. That's how much interest we earn from loans and repayment and loans as the money sits in Treasury. You can see how it jumped up when interest rates rose. We all felt that back 3 or 4 years ago. The Treasury interest also went up. We also, those peaks of severance tax that came in, that also inflated our pot of available money. And so that's why you see that green rise. But again, assume if interest rates stay fairly stable, that should be a stable income. This is new money coming in, not principal repaid, but the interest on those loans plus the Treasury. And then I've put on top of that the red, which is the peaks and valley of severance tax revenue and what those projections look like. That was when December forecast came out, and then this was that drop. And you can see my blue line, red dotted line is also the 10-year average. And so you would have seen a little bit of a drop in that 10-year average. So that's just the inner workings of the loan program. And then these, you'll see this routinely from me, our two portfolios of the fund, the construction fund in blue and the severance tax in red, they're about equal in equity value. And so, both of them have loans and repayment. Both of them have cash sitting in treasury, but they're somewhat balanced out. And it is my job to grow this. You see those peaks, or the top part of that getting larger. My job is to make sure that we have the same buying power out of these two funds for future generations to use this loan program. And so it's balancing all those peaks and valleys to make sure that we're able to take care of business in the future. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we'll get into the loan recommendations.
Anybody have any questions for Kirk? All right, thank you, Kirk. Oh, wait, sorry, Director Felt.
I'm not sure if you said it or not, Kirk, but you had the different lines representing our different revenue sources, and then that 10-year average. I might have missed it, but did you address then? You've got a huge cushion with the loan program because of so many loans we've approved that aren't ready to pay out yet. But that 10-year average is important, right? Because isn't that kind of what you use to level out, right? Because in my time on this board, we've gone to zero twice, and then we've had the highest also. So can you just say a little more about what you do internally to not let the lows be unduly destructive for our borrowers and our grantees, but to not get out over your skis too?
Yeah, thank you, Director Felt. So, and a lot of this plays out at the Finance Committee meeting, but I spoke about the growth of the two funds together. And the reason I went to the 10-year average, we went through a year where there was zero revenue that came in from severance tax, which is a factor into how much we make available for non-reimbursables, which is a fancy word for non-loan. And we also have projects bill grants that were that the Finance Committee, followed by this board, approved that go into the projects bill in 2025. We'll do that again next year. But if I were to, in this September's meeting coming up, I say, well, board, we had zero money from severance tax, so you have no money to do anything in the projects bill non-reimbursable related. It just makes no sense. We can't function like that. And it's really not responsible, because the next year we end up with $90 million. I'm not going to come to the board and say, now you've got $65 million to use a non-reimbursable. I won't be able to succeed in my growth pattern. And so that's why I went to that 10-year average, to help it function the way it needs to function. I don't know if, did that answer enough to, thank you.
Anybody else? All right, thank you, Kirk.
Thank you. That advances forward. Oh, okay. But you're not up there.
Good morning, folks. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. For the record, my name is Joshua Godwin, CWCB staff with the finance section. And this is agenda item 19A, water project loan request for the Willow Creek siphon repair for the Fort Bench Ditch Company in Prowers County within the Arkansas Basin. So the Fort Bench Ditch Company has been delivering water for irrigation in the Arkansas Basin since 1911 and delivers roughly 18,000 acre feet on an annual basis over its 30-mile stretch. The ditch runs through the city of Lamar and crosses underneath two creeks via siphons. The 600-foot siphon that runs underneath Willow Creek is compromised and needs repair. The ditch company is seeking a loan for the siphon repair in the amount of $869,610, and the terms are 30 years at a 2.4% interest rate. My contacts in preparing the board memo have been Chris Henderson, the ditch company's director, as well as Bill Tyner, the engineer for the project. In September of last year, a motorist noticed water bubbling out of a crack in the Memorial Drive and reported to the city of Lamar. After investigation, it was determined that the water was coming from Willow Creek siphon. It was further determined that there was no damage to the road at the time. The road has been checked several times a day for the rest of the irrigation season, but the leak stayed at a slow seep. There is no settling, no sand, and no silt showing up on the road. That said, Memorial Drive is the primary entrance to the Prowers Medical Center, Lamar's only hospital, and there are concerns that if the leak were left, it might wash out the road or require significant repair, requiring folks who are rushing to the hospital to travel an additional couple miles while the road is closed. Some of you may recall the Farmer's Ditch Chicosa siphon repair we did. We got a loan for back in late 2023. This is very similar to that one. The Willow Creek siphon is 60 inches, 60-inch conduit that was originally wooden staves, and then concrete was poured in around the wooden staves around 80 years ago. Much of the flows of the wood has rotted away, and the concrete is showing a lot of wear and cracking. And I suspect that the low flows over the past few years that caused the sediment buildup in Chicosa Creek has also contributed to this one as well, which you'll see in the next slide. The ditch company needs to have at least the section underneath Memorial Drive repaired before the irrigation starts in April, and has contracted with the same company that repaired the Chicosa siphon to remove the wooden stays, clean up the conduit, and spray a cure-in-place liner inside the Willow Creek siphon. The ditch company intends to have the whole 600-foot length of the siphon lined and will likely require it to occur in 2 phases, with the 2025 irrigation season in between those phases. The contractor is responsible for inspecting the liner annually for the first 10 years, which will also allow for an opportunity to check if sediment has continued to build up each year. Here we actually have some photos right before the contractor got started. You can see the wooden staves, they are rotted up. You can see in that first image to the left that at least in this section is about halfway filled up with sediment and rotted wood. And you can see a major crack on the right side. This next slide shows the contractor has already gotten started, by the way. And you can see the amount of work that's already been done to at least get that siphon prepared for the spray in place liner. So about 150 feet has been cleared, cleaned, and primed and ready to actually have the spray in place liner, the cure in place liner sprayed in. Here are the project financials. The project cost is around $861,000. With the service fee, the total loan comes to $869,610. As I mentioned before, the terms are 2.4% interest rate for a 30-year term. Their financial ratios indicate that the company is a overall typical borrower. Collateral will consist of a pledge of assessment revenues backed by assessment covenant and the project itself per policy 5. Lastly, here's a staff recommendation as it's stated in the front page of your board memo. Chris Henderson, the director for the Fort Bend Ditch Company, is here to say a few words as well as answer some questions. And I also believe that Bill Tyner is online as well.
So Chris does want to speak?
I think he's just gonna.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Chris Henderson. I'm president of the Fort Bend Ditch Company. Our water is diverted out of the Arkansas River in eastern Bent County and goes through western Prowers County. We have about 11,000 shareholders, and on their behalf, I wish to thank you for consideration of helping us with this repair project. It's become an overwhelming project. Basically, it grew out of 100-foot repair to having to do the whole thing. So it was something weren't expecting and is beyond our financial capability to cover all at once. So if you've got any questions, I'll be pleased to answer them for you. And again, I'd like to commend you on your staff. They have been excellent. Matt and Joshua have been great to work with. And they've gone out of their ways to assist us in this. So you have a very good staff. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Anybody have any questions? Any concerns? Director Phil.
Just a comment. I think that, we talk a lot about aging infrastructure. And this is a great example, both of, what can happen, but also sort of the urgency that can come with this. So I just want to concur with Chris. I feel like we have a really responsive staff. We've had a number of situations in the last several years that required quick work to keep the water flowing and keep the crops growing. And so just from the Arkansas River perspective, we really appreciate the work in the finance team. And I would move approval of the staff recommendation that's on the screen here,
Okay,
if you're ready for that.
Oh, yeah, I'm just gonna say, as you know, I only take emergency projects anyway, so.
Right.
okay, we have a motion and a second for staff recommendation on agenda item 19A. Is there any other discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye. Are there any opposed? Thank you, Joe.
Thank you all very much.
Yeah.
Hello and good morning. For the record, my name is Zach Salin with CWCB staff. This is agenda item 19B, a water project loan request for the Williams Creek water rights purchase from Rio Grande Water Conservation District Special Improvement District number 2 in Hinsdale County. This slide is showing the gauging station from upstream looking downstream into Grizzly Creek. The Williams Creek water rights purchase is an existing transbasin diversion from Williams Creek in Division 7 into Grizzly Creek in Division 3. The borrower is the Rio Grande Water Conservation District Special Improvement District number 2, which is also known as Subdistrict number 2. Subdistrict number 2's water activity enterprise is seeking a total loan of $723,160 from the Severance Tax Perpetual Base Fund. The terms for this loan will be 30 years at an interest rate of 2.25%. In reviewing this project and preparing the board memo, I've worked closely with Angelo Bella, the program manager of Subdistrict number 2. This slide shows the various locations of the project site. The Williams Creek water right purchase diverts water from Williams Creek, as you can see on the upper map there, located in the San Juan River Basin, from the west side of the Continental Divide into Grizzly Creek on the east. Grizzly Creek flows into the Rio Grande just downstream of the Rio Grande Reservoir. Subdistrict number 2 currently operates under an annual replacement plan, which must demonstrate a sufficient source of replacement water available to replace stream depletions resulting from the groundwater withdrawals within the subdistrict. I want to echo a sentiment I heard from Director Felt yesterday, and I apologize, I will probably inartfully restate this. But what I heard from you yesterday was that the way to achieve breakthrough success towards securing your water future is the success of agriculture. This project will purchase a fractional share of the WCSPB water right, a total of 54.1 acre feet of historical consumptive use, as well as the ability to divert additional water under free river conditions. This will increase the subdistrict's permanent supply of replacement water. The project will enable Subdistrict 2 to augment their stream depletions to the Rio Grande or to store exchange water in the Rio Grande Reservoir. This augments depletions caused by the groundwater withdrawals within the subdistrict. In that sense, I think that the underlying value of this water right purchase is not in the cost per acre foot, but rather in the cost and reverberating effects of 256 wells, overwhelmingly agricultural water users who may be curtailed if the subdistrict is unable to meet their augmentation needs. The subdistrict intends to close on this water right purchase by May 1st, 2025, in order to use it in their 2025 annual replacement plan. Here are the project financials. The total project cost is $723,160, including the 1% service fee, and the loan terms will be 30 years at 2.25%. Our financial ratios indicate that subdistrict number 2 is a typical borrower, and they have no long-term debt or outstanding liabilities. CWCB has made loans to other Rio Grande Water Conservation District subdistricts in the past. Therefore, this borrower does understand our requirements and how we work. The collateral for this loan will consist of a pledge of revenues backed by a rate covenant and the project itself per CWCB policy. Lastly, here's the staff recommendation for the project, as stated on the first page of your memo. CWCB staff recommends the board approve agenda item 19B, a loan for up to $723,160 for costs related to the Williams Creek water rights purchase from the Severance Tax Perpetual Base Fund. If this board has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Mr. Angelo Bella from Subdistrict Number 2 is also here with us online to voice his support for the project and the appreciation for the funding opportunities that this board provides.
All right, thank you, Zach. Any questions? Any concern? Yes, Director Wind.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, 2 quick questions. One is, could you describe the service area of district number 2? And secondly, when there's no call on Willow Creek, there's opportunities for additional transbasin diversion or downstream creek or river?
It's a good question. I believe the Free River diversions come off of the Grizzly Creek flows, but Angelo may be able to answer that better.
Thank you, Zach, and thank you, board, for your time and considering this today. Yeah, so the service area, subdistrict number 2 is the Rio Grande alluvium. So it runs through the Rio Grande corridor, and that consists of the Rio Grande alluvium and the upper Rio Grande. Upper Rio Grande part is from South Fork to Del Norte, and then the Rio Grande alluvium is from Del Norte past Alamosa, again along the river corridor there. So that describes the service area. Hopefully that answered that part of your question. And then yes, there is an opportunity through our purchase and sale agreement with Navajo to divert more water under Free River conditions at a cost. I think it's $250 per acre foot of those additional diversions over the 54.1 acre feet that's allotted to us in this pool 3 that Zach cited.
Does that answer your question, Director Wind? Okay. Director Vasquez?
If the purchaser was interested in buying all the Free River, are we looking at a river that is then dewatered?
I don't believe that would be the case.
Yeah.
All that water is currently flowing into the Rio Grande, and if they were to divert additional water, it would get stored in Rio Grande Reservoir for later release at a time and date that would be more useful to the annual replacement plan.
Thanks.
Thank you, Director Vasquez. Any other questions? Ready for a motion then?
Yes,
okay,
please.
So we would entertain a motion for staff recommendation on agenda item 19B. Hey, Director Clow, thank you. For a second. Director Felt, thank you. All in favor, say aye. Are there any opposed? All right. Thank you, Zach.
Thank you for your
Angelo.
time.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say thank you again and echo the previous gentleman. The staff there at CWCB is a delight to work with, very professional, very accommodating, and just want to say thank you on behalf of subdistrict number 2 in the Rio Grande Water Conservation District for this loan program. It's invaluable, and it can't be overstated how useful this loan program is for public entities like us. So thank you again.
Thank you, Angelo. Okay, Kirk, back to you.
Yeah, Kirk Russell, Finance Section Chief, looking for presentation for number 20. Here we go. Okay, so you've heard two new loans, and I probably don't say enough about how impressed I am with the staff that I have to work with. They are awesome and just dedicated to the cause. So thank you for all their work. Okay, this next project, I've shared this information with the board, but I think with the new board members, I think it's important to maybe back up and give you a little more of the full story here. So CWCB loaned some loan money back in 2008, I believe, and I'll get to some of those details, to the Pagosa Area Water and Sanitation District, and it has gone through several changes over the years, and it was in order to secure a reservoir site called Dry Gulch Reservoir for a future water supply for the area. To put it, I guess this is the details of the loan. It was an acquisition of property to the Pagosa Area Water and Sanitation District, and I'll use the abbreviation PAWS mostly through this presentation. The loan was originally 11.2 million back in 2008, and the terms were originally 3.5% for 30 years. And through the course of time that I'll share the timeline here, we converted it to a 40-year, 1.75% loan with some other issues in it that we'll talk about. And the contact for the pause was Justin Ramsey, and I don't know if he'll be online to help me with any questions that the board has. To get a location, those of you that have traveled over Wolf Creek Pass, and it would be the upper right map that you're looking at. You know, when you come down Wolf Creek Pass, and by the way, it's a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit coming down that pass. It's important to learn a lesson there, which is virtually impossible to do, especially with my foot. But there's a scenic overlook that you stop in. It is just the most picturesque place in Colorado. And if you continue down, it's hard for me to imagine that's a road going north to south as you come down that pass on the west side of the mountain into Pagosa Springs. Shortly before you get to Pagosa Springs, there's a valley to the left as you're driving towards Pagosa Springs, and that is the site of the proposed Dry Gulch Reservoir. There's just a blow up of the same. The black bar would be an indication of where that dam would be, and the water for the reservoir behind it that ultimately runs to the San Juan River to the left of that map. This is an old map from back when we originally proposed the loan. Possible diversion structure, they've looked at maybe filling the reservoir with a gravity feed through ditch. And so these were a lot of preliminary issues, but I want to focus on the Running Iron Ranch and the property that or the owner of that property was the Weber family, and they called it the Running Iron Ranch. That was about 90% of the property needed for this reservoir site. And then there was, you see down at the bottom, the Laverty property that was included in the loan back originally. And there was some interaction needed with the Forest Service with some land exchange that was necessary. I don't believe that was included in the original loan. So our loan was primarily for the purchase of those two properties. So that's a look up that Dry Gulch site, the Running Iron Ranch, looking up from the highway from where the dam would approximately be. And I pulled these out of the archives. I impressed myself back in 2008 when I presented this to the board, my PowerPoint engineering skills. But you're looking there from the highway, I believe it's 160 that runs in towards Pagosa Springs to the right. So we're looking east, and the valley, the dam will, it's just a backup picture. Again, I'm stealing some slides from back in the day. And then I built a dam across that valley that would then ultimately fill up with water. Impressed still? Anybody still impressed with my work back in 2008, my PowerPoint engineering skills? This map, I think, is important for this board in the conversation, and I forgot to mention that Candace Jones is going to speak to the board. She is the president of the San Juan Water Conservancy District, and I'll walk through why San Juan is involved in this project extensively. So I think this map is beneficial. You can see the yellow is actually the Pagosa Area Water and Sanitation District service area. And then you can see the gray lines just outside of that, that is the San Juan Water and Conservancy District. And you can see why the two of them originally worked really close together in trying to develop some water for the area. And it's important to know that their efforts have gone way back to the 80s when they started looking at sites to develop water for a growing community of the Pagosa area water sand. But then they got hit by the O2 drought, and there was, as many areas around the state, there was a bit of a panic that maybe we need to get moving on this opportunity to develop water. The Pagosa district has since found other ways to satisfy their current thirst for their growing community. But you can see that a majority of the San Juan Water Conservancy District, and Candace can maybe expand on this if you have any questions, but it overlaps a lot of the district is my point here. All right, the background on this history of this loan. Back in 2008, we approved that interest, that 3.5% interest loan to PAWS. At the same time, or very similar, the Water Supply Reserve Fund was in its infant stages. And the San Juan Water Conservancy District received $1 million Water Supply Reserve Fund grant for the same purpose. So we had a loan and a grant to two different entities to serve the same effort to secure this property. In 2013, some changes occurred with the PAWS board and maybe even the San Juan board, and there was a concern that we shouldn't have signed up for this commitment and put it on the current ratepayers of the PAWS district. They felt overwhelmed with its price and commitment, and they were finding other ways to satisfy their needs. And just again, change in leadership. And they came to us and said, we'd like to close out this loan. And I think I may be the only one that wants to make sure that I preserve this, but they did not complete the entire project. And that's critical to the loan program, in my opinion. We like projects to do as they are planning to do. And so they said, we'd like to close this out with just the land that we purchased called the Running Iron Ranch, leaving the Laverty. It's still out there if we ever do something with it, but we'd like to close it out, put it into repayment. Presented it to the board, and the board agreed. And we closed out the loan with maybe a future return to see how the Laverty piece could fold into a future project for this. So then in 2025, and again, they were in repayment for a few years, and we were interacting with them routinely. They just did not like the loan. It was causing too much strain on their ratepayers. They had a lot of pipes that needed to be repaired. And so we worked with them, and we put together an agreement that we gave them some relief. We reduced that interest rate. We divided, and I should point out as well, at the time, the property I think was originally valued about $9 million when we helped them buy it. It was appraised. And then get through the 2015 is when we ultimately went through the three-way agreement. The value of the land through an appraisal was cut in half. And they were interested in unloading it. And all of this, we were saying a lot of work went into this. Maybe we should work with you. And so the board was willing to cut the purchase, or that existing loan that was 30 years into two 20-year loans. And we said, well, the value of the property is half of what it was originally when you bought it. How about if we put that loan in repayment at 1.75, give you some debt relief, delay the second half of the loan to start 20 years later, and then put that at 1.75% as well. So it was a 40-year loan with a little odd shift in there. It also included some caveats that if you do sell it within this planning period, which we're in right now, the grant that we offered to the San Juan district, and this is why they were a third party to this agreement, you got to pay that grant back because it didn't serve the purpose of the project, which is build a reservoir. So that we folded that into the loan. If you sell it, you got to pay back the $1 million at 3.5% as well. And all of the interest that was lost to the CWCB loan program, because we made this agreement, that all has to be returned as well. We'll go back in time and say, this is what you should have paid if we hadn't agreed to this contract. So that all happened in 2015. In addition, and there's probably some more details that maybe I'm missing out on, but I think I got the highlights. There was a component in there because we wanted to make sure, again, the value of the property was half of what it originally was purchased at. And we didn't want them to do something where we could step in and help with whatever funding was available, opportunities. The CWCB could play a role here again. And so we put a right of first refusal that if PAWS offers to sell the Running Iron Ranch, this board has an option to purchase it, and it included a 90-day notice. We are on the clock of that 90-day notice. They have submitted a letter to us indicating that they have a purchaser and that they are putting us into that 90-day period, and we need to respond. About that same time, the San Juan Water Conservancy District that has a vested interest in this, and there's, again, that three-way agreement has some interpretation, and San Juan has filed a lawsuit against PAWS saying, we need to, I shouldn't even say what's in the lawsuit because I'm not really deep into that, but in essence, there's conflict in what's written in that contract and whether PAWS can act to sell it now. So we are kind of in this weird position where we have a letter saying they're going to sell it. I need to come to the board and get an action, whether this board wants to take this first right of refusal, which comes with its own complexities, how the board, with our funding and the way the legislature controls what we do with our money, how we would even pull that off. But I'll get to the recommendation here in a second. So I think I've been in this project almost my entire career at CWCB. So I have quite a history, and I pointed out that this has been in the works since the 80s. Steve Harris from Durango Harris Engineering was involved with this, many reports, and may not pointed this out well enough, but back when they came to us originally, they were panicked that of the 15 sites that had potential reservoir opportunities, they were down to 2. One of them was under contract for development, and there was one location left, and this was it. And so there was this lot of development going on down there. Their growth was in 7% back in the day, and so they felt there was an urgency to secure this particular property. So again, a lot of work has gone in. There's a lot of due diligence money that has spent to try to keep this active. And by the way, the Southwest Water Conservation District had the water right that originally was to be developed for this, and they offered it to the San Juan Water Conservancy District and PAWS. I think maybe Candace can split those out, but it was given to those folks to develop the water right. So they go back way back, being involved in this as well. So I just threw out this question: what is CWCB's role in the project? I don't have an answer to that other than we do some great things at CWCB. A lot of things very proud of. I don't know where we find our role in this, but we have a three-way agreement that has a responsibility for this board to do something at this time, and so that's why I'm here. Why is the first right of refusal included? The clause included, I think I pointed out that it was really if they were going to sell it at a price that was really low just because the stress on their ratepayers was so bad, that maybe CWCB, should act and try to preserve this longer. But I think the value is now back up to its full original price, maybe and some. And today's options are: we can just not respond at all, we can decline the first right of refusal, or we can accept it and try to figure out a way to step in and buy this. So at this point in time, I'm going to make my recommendation, and then Candace, I think, is going to speak, and I don't know if there's anybody online as well. But at this point in time, the staff is recommending the board not exercise the right of first refusal to purchase the Running Iron Ranch and from Pagosa Area Water and Sand. And again, the emphasis is at this time. So with that, I'll take any questions. Otherwise, I will turn the microphone over to Candace.
Thank you, Kirk. Does anybody have any questions on what Kirk has presented so far? Okay, thank you. Don't go far. Jones.
Thank you, directors. Just one correction on the slides, and I'll mention this in my remarks as well. Kirk mentioned that the San Juan Water Conservancy District sued PAWS. That's not correct. PAWS sued the San Juan Water Conservancy District. And I want to thank Viola for getting the statement to all of you. I sent it last night, so you have a written copy if you'd like to refer to that as well. I am Candace Jones, for the record. I live in Pagosa Springs in Archuleta County. I have been a member of the San Juan Water Conservancy District Board since 2022 and board president since just last year. You have before you the staff recommendation relating to right of first refusal to purchase property acquired by the Conservancy District and the PAWS with CWCB financing support. The districts bought the property, as Kirk said, as a reservoir site. The Conservancy District believes that PAWS is obligated by contract, the three-way agreement, not to sell the project property at this time or during a 20-year planning period that was included in that three-way agreement. That 20 years started in 2015 and goes at least through 2035. There's some kind of ambiguity about the exact date, but through 2035. Following from that, the Conservancy District believes that PAWS notice of sale that they gave you in January is not valid or effective for triggering a decision by this board now on the right of first refusal. PAWS sued the Conservancy District in December, asking the court, so the month before they sent you that notice, asking the court to decide whether or not PAWS is in fact entitled to sell the project property. PAWS sent the sale notice to the CWCB despite putting the sale question at issue in its lawsuit against the Conservancy District. I am here to ask you, the board, not to act in a manner that could be perceived as taking sides when the right to sell itself is an issue before the court. PAWS went out of its way not to join the CWCB as a party in the litigation, even though the CWCB is a party to the relevant agreement that's being litigated. And the Conservancy District has also gone out of its way, I think, to cooperate and not drag you into this litigation. Because the Conservancy District does not believe PAWS steps towards selling the project property are legitimate, the Conservancy District believes it is also not appropriate for PAWS to ask the CWCB to take a decision now on the right of first refusal. If the CWCB board, considering the staff recommendation and the advice of your counsel, determines that some response to PAWS is required now, I ask that the response acknowledge the pending litigation and challenging the right of first refusal, or challenging the right to sell, and reserve to the CWCB the right to take a decision on the right of first refusal in the future if and when PAWS is in fact entitled to sell the project property consistent with the agreement and the court's ruling. I want to share with you a little bit of history about what you call the Dry Gulch Reservoir Project. We now call it the San Juan Headwaters Project. And the Conservancy District's added concern about a forced sale now of the project property on the water rights that are owned by the district. The Dry Gulch project started as a collaborative effort between the Conservancy District and PAWS. The Conservancy District owns water storage rights of 6,300 acre feet that were adjudicated in 1967 by the Southwestern Water Conservation District and conveyed to the Conservancy District after it was formed, soon after it was formed in 1987. The 2002 drought motivated the Conservancy District and PAWS to move forward plans to develop water storage. The districts worked together to obtain a decree for an additional water right to fill and refill an 11,000 acre foot reservoir. At least the lawyers in the room are familiar with those cases because it went twice to the Supreme Court. The districts also worked together to purchase the land for the reservoir. And as Kirk said, there was some urgency to do that in light of the available sites that have been identified. The districts are joint owners of that later water right, not the original water right from Southwestern, but the later water right and the project property. The financial crisis of 2009 and the recession that followed dampened enthusiasm, I'll say, and led to some change in membership on the PAWS board and a break in the district's relationship. In the meantime, though, as Kirk described, the districts have obtained project funding from CWCB, and in 2015, the districts restructured the outstanding obligation. PAWS has been making the annual payments, and they would like to be free of that financial obligation. And at the same time, the San Juan Water Conservancy District has been working on due diligence and project planning, all in, unfortunately, a somewhat acrimonious conditions with PAWS. The Conservancy District is sympathetic to PAWS financial considerations. I want to make that clear. At the same time, however, the project property is still a unique and essential asset for developing water storage in the area. You all know that reservoirs cannot be built on any random plot of land, and planning, design, financing, construction all take a long time to get done. Amazingly, some of my neighbors don't think about that, and they want me to tell them a specific date. When is the reservoir going to be built? The Conservancy District Board is actively exploring alternatives to PAWS ownership of the project property, and those efforts are preliminary, but somewhat encouraging that there may be other paths forward here if given the time to explore them and work them out. The Conservancy District must now also consider how the PAWS litigation and its efforts to sell the project property could impact the project-related water rights. The districts, going back to the 1960s with Southwestern's efforts, have made substantial investments to obtain those rights and to satisfy periodic due diligence. Even if the Conservancy District loses the pending case in court, the project-related water rights are not covered by this loan or by the contract, the three-way contract that is in dispute. The Conservancy District will need to do whatever we can to protect the water rights from being impaired by the PAWS litigation and any potential adverse outcome in that litigation. So to wrap up, I will reiterate the requests I made at the top of my remarks, which is one, please avoid acting in a manner today that takes sides in this dispute that's now pending in court. If you decide you must authorize a response to PAWS today, I would ask that you please craft the response to acknowledge the litigation between the districts, to reflect the position that PAWS sale notice is of no effect until the court actually resolves the lawsuit, and then only if the outcome is that PAWS is in fact able to sell the property, and to defer a substantive response on the right of first refusal until the court determines whether or not PAWS is in fact entitled to sell. If you decide to take a position on the right of first refusal, I would ask that you reserve the right to withdraw your position if the court decides in the Conservancy District's favor that PAWS is not entitled to sell the property now, and to exercise that right of first refusal in the future if and when PAWS is legitimately able to sell under the contract. So thank you for listening, and I'm happy to do my best to answer whatever questions you have.
Thank you for your comments. I think at the depth of this, I would like to hear what Jen has to say.
Thank you, Director Combs. There's a lot of things to potentially respond to here, but the one that sticks out in my mind the most is the concept that responding to the notice we received from PAWS in January about this right of first refusal, whether that means we're taking a position in the lawsuit. And I don't think it means that. I think that we would craft a letter that simply says we are or are not exercising. I mean, I guess if we were to say we are exercising the right of first refusal, that would be, you know, assuming that they did have the ability to sell it. But if we follow staff's recommendation, if this board does and does not exercise that right, I don't think that's taking a position on the lawsuit. And in fact, if the board wanted to, in the letter, we could say things like, this does not mean we're taking a position on the lawsuit. And we could say things like, hey, if it's determined that pause can't sell the running iron, or if pause otherwise determines that it's not going to sell the ranch, then, you know, we reserve the right in the future to exercise this right of first refusal if they decide to sell again. So those things could be incorporated into any letter we send pause if the board wants to do that. All that to say, I really don't think sending this letter means we're taking a position.
All right, thank you. So is there some language then that would be proposed with this staff recommendation that would allude more to what position you're describing? Do you think is that?
I did look at some language this morning, Kirk, which I sent to Kirk. He might be able to pull it up.
Thank you. I have to say, Jen is the best. I mean, a lot of stuff happens just so short notice, and thank you for all that you do for us and the entire board. But so as a result of Candace's recommendation or comments, we did pull together, and this is primarily Jen's efforts, a modification to the recommendation. And I'm not going to get into the legal side because that's not my space, but I think there is a fair workaround in this just to make the San Juan district comfortable. And I'm happy to have that put up on the screen. I know sometimes it's difficult to craft a motion, and so I think Jen did a great job of identifying a modification to my recommendation that makes it clear that we're staying out of, and I apologize for the misstatement about San Juan suing pause, but this I think covers a little bit of what we're trying to get at. And again, Jen, if there's a modification as a result of this, and I'm kind of turning this over to the board as how you would want to handle this, but I think it's fair to say that we don't know what the future holds with the legal action between the two of them. And I think we still would like a seat at the table, at least monitoring what happens through that. So.
Okay. Reading through this, just 1 second, Derek, but reading through this, I think that does cover adequately what you would describe, Jen. I think that preserves our position as a board without obligating one way or the other. So, Director Felt.
I guess I just want a little clarification. It seemed like there were 3 possible paths. Move to, I guess, exercise the right of first refusal and purchase the land. Or I would call it exercise the right of first refusal to formally decide not to purchase the land or not respond. And so I'm not sure I'm right about that. What does exercise a right of first refusal mean? Because it sounded like either if you respond, you, in the positive or the negative, you are exercising the right of first refusal. Because I mean, the way it's framed, it's a right of refusal, right? It's not a right. Embedded in that is a right to take action and purchase, but the right is actually called a right to refuse. So I'm just wondering, when we say not exercise its right of first refusal, is that it's sort of the no response with additional commentary?
So Director Felt, you're suggesting that if this were to be accurate, it would say the recommendation would be that the board exercise its right of first refusal to not purchase the property?
I don't think that's what we're doing. But I'm not sure if I'm explaining myself very well. It seems like if you accept or deny, that is exercising the right of first refusal. And the other option was basically not to respond, but it sounds like what we're talking about is not exercising either path on the right of first refusal, but responding and not responding to that exactly, but then doing a response that preserves our right for the future and some other things.
I'm not exactly sure how to respond to your concern or question. But I thought that, I think what you're saying is that whether we purchase a property or not, we are exercising the right of first refusal. Is that right?
Well, if you respond positively or negatively, it seemed to me you are exercising it, right? Especially if they have another buyer. But
I thought that's what I just said, but you're not accepting what I just said. So what about what I just said? Do you disagree with?
I couldn't hear you.
I thought that what I said was what you said, but I think you're making a distinction that I'm not quite understanding. So can you tell me again what the distinction is between what I said, which is when we're exercising the right. In exercising the right, we can either decide not to purchase it or we can purchase it. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's a positive action that you would take.
To
right?
exercise.
Yeah, versus, no, I thought we were heading for maybe the no response.
I guess I was thinking of the no response as not exercising the right. But I see what you're saying now. The right is to refuse it. So we are exercising the right to refuse.
Yeah.
So maybe a rewording, or maybe the motion wouldn't be to accept staff's recommendation exactly as it's worded, but since their recommendation is to decide not to purchase the Running Iron Ranch, you'd be moving staff's recommendation in that respect, if not the wording of the recommendation itself.
Can I just for a second, Director McLeod wants to make a comment and then we'll keep moving here. So, and then.
Well, I have a couple of comments. Number one, I can't see how purchasing the property would be a benefit to the Water Conservation Board in the first place, but that's not the issue today. I think what is important is what is the exact language of that contract? I mean, right of first refusal is a general statement, but to deal with it at all, I think we really need to look at the precise language in the contract that defines our right and how to exercise it or not. Do we have access to that, Kirk, in a expedient manner to see what exactly the contract says?
I have it on my computer. I think I could pull it up because I'm in the Zoom meeting. I'll initially read it, Director McLeod, and let me know if you want me to pull it up. If PAWS decides to sell the Running Iron Ranch, it will provide notice to the CWCB and San Juan Water Conservancy District pursuant to this agreement's notice provisions. PAWS shall also provide CWCB and San Juan a current appraisal of the Running Iron Ranch to establish the current market value of a fee simple interest in the property. CWCB will have 90 days within which to reject its right of first refusal or agree to exercise its right of first refusal. CWCB shall provide notice of the decision regarding this first right of refusal. And then there's additional language about how to determine the value if the CWCB elects to exercise its right of first refusal, which I think, as Director Felt has already pointed out, might be faulty wording.
So maybe the best course of action, which is, I think, consistent with what Director Feld is saying, is to take no action. Simply to say that because of the pending lawsuit, it's not clear that Pagosa has the right to sell. And until that is determined, we will take no action under that provision of the contract.
It's an option, but the trigger is whether PAWS decides to sell. They have decided to sell. I'm gonna see if I can
But-
pull this provision up, because if you're like me, it's easier to read it.
Okay, so if it,
Yeah.
okay, when it's your turn, yeah. If it's all right, we'll have Director Vasquez and then while you're looking that up, Jen.
I think the question Director Felt was asking gets at the question whether first right of refusal is something that you can only use once, right? So by responding, somehow we're burning our opportunity one way or the other. Is that correct legally?
It's hard to say under the terms of the contract. I don't think the contract necessarily anticipates that there'd be more than one notice. If there were more than one notice, I would argue that we're entitled to more than one ability to decide whether or not we want to purchase it.
And the language conserving our opportunity for future then would work, in your opinion? Mhm.
I'd argue that
Yeah.
it would apply, yes.
Okay, so then if I'm understanding, we're wondering if the notice being sent by pause to sell triggers our 90 days, or does our 90 days begin after a court determination of whether they can legally sell? And so then that puts us on the position of, are we going to exercise or defer? Or can we defer and then exercise later? And that's the thing is, you, Kirk, in your opinion, if I heard you right, you thought in January when they made notice that started the 90 days, if that is a correct understanding, that our 90 days began January 17th. And so that's really the question is, are we really under the 90 days? Or do we have the ability to wait until a court determination on the ability to sell to trigger our 90 days?
So is your question whether the letter we received in January is our trigger, or if the resolution of the court case is our trigger? Is that your question?
So I guess mine's not a question. Mine is, I guess I'm asking, is that a summation of what our big question is here? Are we really on the clock or are we not? I think we can determine how we exercise that right later to Director Feltz. I think we can determine that. But did the clock start or did it not with that January 17 intent?
San Juan seems to be taking the position that that clock didn't necessarily start. My conversations with staff lead me to believe we are in agreement that the clock has started as of that January 17 letter. I mean, pause has decided to sell.
May I make?
Just 1 second, let me make sure if that's okay. So to clarify, Jen, you're saying that because you believe it was triggered on the intent to sell or the decision to sell, and when pause made that decision, that started it.
Yes.
And if that's the case, the court determination wouldn't affect our determination. Is that what you're saying? So if we would still have to, we need to make a decision now or within that 90 days, irrespective of how the court case turns out?
I suppose that if the CWCB were going to decide to purchase the property, we'd have to wait and see how the court case turned out.
Okay. All right. Ms. Jones, briefly, we'll give you a second.
I don't envy Jen her position. The agreement is not very well crafted. You'll see on the language that she's got up there, the actual first sentence in that section refers to the right of first refusal being when pause offers the property, and then the next paragraph says decides to sell the property. On the whether pause has offered the property, since the litigation commenced, pause had at one time talked about retaining a broker to offer the property for sale, to list the property for sale. PAWS the board directed its staff to stand down from hiring a broker to list the property for sale after the litigation was commenced. So, I mean, I think, again, I don't envy Jen her position. It's not a very well-crafted position, and you never know exactly what a court's going to do anyway. But I wanted to point that out.
Thank you. So we're just talking about purchasing or the land purchase, not any type of water right. Correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I'll tell you, there was an unsolicited offer that some PAWS board members touted as being a great offer. But that offer actually, I don't think that the potential buyer understood the water rights not being subject to this. They thought they were also buying the water rights. And we publicly said, no, the water rights are not for sale. The project water rights, there are some ditch water rights that were acquired with the property, but the water rights I referred to are not subject to this agreement, no.
Can we put the amended recommendation back up or even side by side up? Just after the discussion, I would like to be able to look at what this amended recommendation is and see if we agree that it's saying what we think it's saying or if it addresses our concerns.
Well, may I comment?
I'm sorry. Yes, Director McLeod.
Well, you can't exercise the right of first refusal without knowing what the competing offer is, right? So the offers for sale language, I think, is controlling here. How would we know what offer we would make if we don't know what the competing offer is from another buyer? That's the essence of a right of first refusal, is to say, if you're going to sell it to party A for 10 million, we have the right to match that offer and buy it instead. That's not possible at this point because they haven't actually offered it for sale. So it would be impossible to exercise the right at this point, in my opinion.
Well, that is typically how a right of first refusal works, but that provision that I just had up provides for a different process. So along with the notice of intent to sell, PAWS is supposed to also send us an appraisal. If we don't like the appraisal, we get a second appraisal. And then the purchase price is the average of those two appraised values. Is that right, Kirk?
That's what I understand.
So it's a different type of process. I think some would argue it's not really a right of first refusal. What's described here is a process sort of different from a typical right of first refusal.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting hung up on a bit. It seems more like an option, a first option. And so this language has, I had some of the same questions as Director McLeod, just refusing what? Just refusing the option, I think, not refusing the opportunity to take action in place of an offer. So that's where I was going, but you just kind of addressed it.
So I mean, this is, the land is a collateral piece. And if we, let them sell it or whatever, and we lose that first right of refusal, do we also lose the opportunity to, I mean, if they sell that for what the collateral covers, that's what concerns me, is if the property sells and we lose that first right of refusal and it sells for less than what the collateral is worth, we're not whole.
Just to be clear, the land is not collateralized. We don't typically take property as collateral from municipal sub-districts of the state. And so in this case, it's disconnected from the loan. However, the loan contract with the three-way agreement includes a requirement that it is paid in full upon sale to another entity. So our loan is whole
as a result of the agreement.
Okay.
As we move forward here, I think we should all look at just a few points. As CWCB, are we interested in owning land? So does the right of refusal, is it an issue we have to put at the top of our list? Do we need to make a decision today? And then after that, how do you want to proceed? Because I think, well, I know Jen did an excellent job of clarifying it's not a true right of refusal. This is a different scenario. But I think it fundamentally comes down to, do we want to maintain that right? That's that's kind of the bedrock of why we would make a decision. Director Vasquez?
I think it was very helpful to clarify that it is not collateralized, that we are to be made whole according to the agreement. So having that first right of refusal is not, maintaining it is not critical to making the loan whole. So that helps me a lot, free up that thought process.
Director McLeod?
Well, as I said in my earlier remarks, I cannot imagine a scenario where this board would want to purchase that land under any circumstance. So I don't think we need to break a sweat over whether we retain or lose this right at this point, because I don't think we'd ever want to exercise the right to purchase the land. So I think we just tell them that we're not going to do anything at this point and let it ride and see what the court decides. But in any case, I don't think we want to be purchasing that land. It doesn't help us in any way to buy the land, because they are obligated to pay us off when they sell it, if they sell it.
Yes, Director Ross.
Yes, I agree with Director McLeod that I can't see benefit to owning land. It sounds like there's also some potential issues with the water rights, which we haven't even gotten into. So it just seems like what we're trying to do is acknowledge the letter that we've gotten, but then also preserve anything that we might need to based on the outcome of the court case. And so it just feels like right now we're not trying to own this property. So what can we do to kind of acknowledge that and then preserve anything? If things change, we'd need to be able to respond again.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps along those same lines, then, would it be recommended to take formal action, not to take action, or just a staff letter back to the parties saying the board has not taken action? What, given that scenario, what might you be looking for?
Response to that is it might depend on whether the board wants to make any of these additional statements, like we're not taking a position on the lawsuit. We reserve our right to respond to any future notice if you don't sell it this time around. If we want to preserve those types of arguments, then it seems a response would be necessary. A response might be nice, just to let PAWS know we're not ignoring their notice, we're following. We're just not, we're just making an active decision, but there's other ways to let them know we're following and not responding. But I think that's where we're at. We could not respond, but we wouldn't be able to preserve these types of comments, although that is definitely an option.
It seems to me it would be wise to take Jen's advice that we do respond formally to the notice, but that we're taking the opportunity to stand away from the court case and wait and see what happens. We don't have to even speak to the first right of refusal in that formal response to the letter, it would seem.
So in that sense, the letter would acknowledge receipt, but not respond substantively in any way.
And reserve whatever rights we may have for the future.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, okay, so then we would look at maybe the recommendation would be different as far as the language. I'll jot it down in your handy dandy notebook over there, Jen.
To, give me a few minutes to work on language, take on agenda item 21 and revisit agenda item 20 at the end of agenda item 21.
Okay. You're the best. All right, let's do that. Let's give them a minute to kind of work some of this out. They've heard our concerns. They know what our intent is, I believe, and let's give them another stab at this and we'll come back. So then that will put us on 21, is that correct? Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Can I make a
please.
suggestion?
Yes,
Maybe-
please.
Maybe a 5.
Just take a 5-minute break and then start 21. Okay, let's do that right quick. We'll take a 5-minute break and then come back. Sorry, man. Okay.
It doesn't need to be on the recording. Just so you all know, there are box lunches next door if anybody is hungry and you want to have something to lower your blood sugar, increase your, whatever it is. Yeah, Viola let me know that there is food next door, so please help yourself if you need more than candy.
Okay, thank you. What we're gonna do here is we're gonna go on and we're just gonna handle all of 21. And then we'll come back to 20 at the end. So we will have a recusal on B. So we'll do A and then we'll do B separate on its own and then continue on. So over to you, Ben.
All right, thank you, Director Combs. 4 minutes left for a good morning. Ben Wade, CWCB staff for the record, presenting item 21. Go over the WSRF applications. We received 14 applications this round on December 1. Staff recommended approval for all 14 applications. I'll be presenting 11 of those today. Thank you so much for approving the consent agenda item yesterday, and Director Riss approved 2 grants back on March 5th. Overall, we had 12 statewide requests this round for drought resiliency grants, 8 aging infrastructure. The December 1 deadline turned out to be the final deadline where statewide funding was available. So from this point forward, the board will be only hearing basin only requests, if any. So lots of good projects that were funded through that. And as always, these projects have been approved by their respective roundtables. So we'll move on to 21A, which is an application from the Terror Ditch and Reservoir Company. They provide irrigation water for 500 acres and 50 residents near the town of Paonia in Delta County. Ditch is over 100 years old. There's a section of the ditch, over 5,500 feet, rests along a narrow cliff. And due to erosion over the years, this section is now prone to landslides and is in danger of collapsing. They also lose water due to seepage in this part of the ditch. The overall project is much larger. Total project cost is over $915,000. But WSR funds is just kind of focused on a few items in the scope and budget. And so WSRF funds will be used to purchase 5,585 feet of PVC pipe. And these improvements will result in 217 acre feet of water efficiency savings per year. With us today on Zoom is Karen Good. Karen will ask if you want to unmute yourself and turn your camera on. And both of us will be available for any questions the board may have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Are there any questions or concerns on agenda item A? Named Terror Ditch, but anyway, that's good. All right, I think we'll we'll move on and then we'll allow Director Johnson to recuse himself for B. We'll continue on. We will vote on B.
Thank you very much.
Is it just a disclosure?
Thank you,
or is
Karen.
it-
I am officially recusing myself from 21B. Yeah,
Thank you.
Greg Johnson for the record.
All right.
Application from the city of Aurora. But as Director Johnson indicated, Denver Water's a project partner, matching partner on this one. So the city of Aurora is going to use WSRF funds for 4 airborne snow observatory flights. 2 of the flights are going to be in the upper South Platte upper South Platte. 2 are going to be in the upper Blue River Basin. The board has approved many of these WSRF grants before. Obviously, and also has approved funding through the projects bill. And, the flights continue to help gather accurate snow measurement data given to water providers so they can make better management decisions for their respective systems. And then, as always, ASO data is available to the public. On Zoom with us is Luz Lopez and Matt Ashley from the city of Aurora. Luz and Matt, if you could unmute yourself, turn your camera on, and we're available for any questions the board may have.
On agenda item 21B, again, we will take action on this one independent of the others. So are there any questions or comments? Recommendation for agenda item 21B to a motion for staff recommendation on 21B. Director Haas, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to also comment that I think this kind of data is going to be increasingly important as we see the feds pull back from this kind of information as well. And we're going to need to kind of patch it together on our own. So I appreciate this work and I will move staff's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion on 21B from Director Haas and a second for Director Vasquez. All in favor, say aye. Are there any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, do you want to grab Director Johnson right quick? Ready to go.
Great. 21C is an application from the Water Conservancy District. The Bonnie Dam is a reservoir in Kit Carson County and is leased from the Bureau of Reclamation. Water in the dam is used for agricultural purposes. Back in 2012, the dam was drained for compound compliance, but water is now trapped in accumulated settlements that are over 25 feet thick and spread over an area about 1,700 acres. This results in a lot of ratified growth that consumes large amounts of water, resulting in non-native habitat conditions and a negative impact for recreation at the reservoir. WSRF funds would be used to conduct a geotechnical and hydroecological investigation to assess the sediment in shallow groundwater, analyze the evapotranspiration effects on water budgets, and design a subsurface drainage infrastructure to improve the recreation habitat at the reservoir, as well as conserve water and increase river flows. And on Zoom with us today is Noah Nemmers on behalf of the district, and we're available to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you. Any questions on agenda item C? Thank you.
Great. 21D is the first of 2 applications from the Colorado Rio Grande Restoration Foundation. This is going to be the second of 2 airborne snow observatory flight grant requests this round. I should have put those back to back, but this funding is going to be covers 3 years and going to result in 12 ASO flights over the headwaters of the Rio Grande and the Conejos River system, and they're going to wave when they fly over Nathan's house. Just kidding, Nathan. Again, critical data that's needed, as Director Haas pointed out. Data is made publicly available. I don't know if Carla Schreiber is here in the audience.
She is, she's back there.
There you are. Thank you. She's available for any questions as well, and Daniel Boyes and Emma Reeser are on Zoom with us. If the board has any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on agenda item D? All right, guess we'll move on. Thank you, Ben.
Great. 21E, again, the same applicant. The applicant and other project partners will create 2 water-wise demonstration sites. First is going to be at a park in the town of La Jara, and the other at the Rio Grande Hospital in the town of Del Norte. Both locations are going to remove existing turf and replace that with low water use shrubs, trees, plants, and the irrigation systems at both locations will be upgraded. And along with these sites, will be built picnic areas and sidewalks so that the public can enjoy each of these sites. The goals of the project are just to help promote water conservation and the use of drought tolerant plants for an appealing low water landscape for cities and homeowners. And the hope is that both locations will be a model for other communities in the San Luis Valley. Again, Carla's here in person, Daniel and Emma are on Zoom if the board has any questions for us today.
Thank you. Any questions on E?
F is an application from the San Luis Valley Irrigation District. The applicant provides irrigation water to landowners in Alamosa, Rio Grande, and Saguache counties. They own the Farmers Union Canal, which diverts water from the Rio Grande. Over 100 years ago, the canal's concrete structures were built to mix in with prior constructed canals in the valley, operated by the Rio Grande Water Users Association. The Farmers Union Canal is junior to the Rio Grande Canal, so the district built structures to flow underneath the Rio Grande Canal. The 1D Bay Bridge is over 100 years old, so poor condition currently and is located close to the headwaters of both canals. So we'll use grant funds to remove and replace the structure, which will allow water to be diverted to both canals. And we have Robert Phillips on Zoom with us today if the board has any questions on this project.
Thank you.
All right, great. 21G is an application from the Sterling Irrigation Company. They are an agricultural nonprofit located in the city of Sterling. They own Sterling No. 1 ditch. The ditch diverts from the South Platte River and then flows for about 2 miles before it reaches a second head gate and bypass structure. The bypass structure is over 60 years old. Currently, they have pieces of wood that they place in the structure to dam up the water. They're currently experiencing some operational difficulties and they do have safety concerns, especially, they lack confidence if there's a flooding event. They don't believe that the current structure could withstand a flooding event. This is again a bigger project. The overall project cost is over 1.1 million. The project includes removing and replacing the bypass with a reinforced concrete structure, and then including a remote monitoring system installed at the location. Our grant funds will be used to purchase the materials and prepare the site for construction. And in the audience with us is Gene Manuello from the district. He and I are both available if the board has any questions.
Okay, are there any questions on agenda item G?
Application from the Lone Cone Ditch and Reservoir Company. This board awarded the Reservoir Company a grant back in September of 2022 for the first phase, which completed the design and engineering for the rehab of the reservoir, which is over 100 years old and located in San Miguel County. The current outlet structure has been under threat of caving in, preventing the release of water. The outlet begins with a trench that's dug along the bottom of the reservoir to the existing concrete outlet structure. This particular channel is not lined, so it experiences erosion and the sides are collapsing in. So they'll use our grant funds to support the channel with concrete wing walls tongue twister there, and backfill it to prevent future collapse. The outlet will be replaced with a rock check dam. The current steel pipe in the embankment will be replaced with precast concrete and high density polyethylene pipe, and a new valve system will also be installed. We do have Tom Meehan from the Lone Cone Ditch and Reservoir Company on Zoom with us. We're both available if the board has any questions.
On this, Ben, when it said that they might be applying for U.S. Fish and Wildlife, I think, funds, is that considered in this budget that we see at the top of this project sheet? Or would that be in addition to the numbers that are done here?
You know, it was included for this grant application. Colorado Ag Water Alliance was working with Lone Cone, and they've had a conversation with U.S. Fish and Wildlife about adding in money later. So it's they can cover. My understanding from the applicant is they can cover the 11,000, but if the U.S. Fish and Wildlife can contribute, that's great for them. But they can continue to move forward, and it sounds like the Fish and Wildlife are still interested in contributing to the project.
Okay, but the project goes on whether that funding comes through or not. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or?
Application from the Farmers Water Development Company. They provide water from the Gurley Dam for irrigation to 210 shareholders who irrigate about 12,000 acres, as well as provide water for the town of Norwood. Back in 2019, a portion of the embankment on the northern side of the dam was oversaturated by melting snow, and then a spring rainstorm came in, resulting in a slide of a 3-foot thick layer down the slope. It was repaired to the satisfaction of the Division of Water Resources Dam Safety Inspector. And then they had another similar slip in 2023, about 100 feet from the previous slide. So the Dam Safety Inspector had previously recommended that if they had further damage like this to use that same repair methodology for the entire and so we'll use our grant funds to remove and replace material from the slide, repair the buttress with reusable on-site material. And this will help mitigate future events and also help the company shift their focus on other infrastructure needs at Gurley Dam. We do have Dave Alexander on Zoom with us. We're both available to answer any questions you all have.
Okay, any questions on? Hi. Keep going.
Great. Thank you, Dave. 21J is an application from the White River Conservation District. The Oak Ridge Park Ditch diverts water from the White River and provides water to irrigate over 3,200 acres. The district and their project partners have been analyzing the ditch company's entire system to identify projects and alternatives. This particular ditch crosses both the Little Beaver and Coal Creeks. The structure that controls the ditch flows is currently falling apart. So they'll use grant funds to install a siphon on the ditch where both streams cross, allowing the ditch water to pass through, but also use it as a fish barrier. And we do have several folks from the district. Vanessa Trout, Chris Collins, Elizabeth Chandler, Blake McGain are all on Zoom with us if the board has any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on agenda item J?
Our final item 21K is an application from the town of Oak Creek. The town owns the Sheriff Reservoir Dam, which is the town's sole source of water. The dam itself is located in Rio Blanco County. They received previous grants through WSRF back in 2021 and 2023 to remove the outlet gate and install upgraded operating equipment at the dam. The current project involves replacing the undersized spillway, reestablishing the original dam crest elevation, and replacing the outlet terminal structure. This is another biggie where the overall cost is $5 million. WSRF funds will be used for the line items in the budget for the demo and excavation of the spillway embankment work and the purchase and installation of riprap for the project. And we do have John Tracy, who is a consultant for the town, on Zoom with us to answer any questions the board may have.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions on K? We're good there. What we're gonna, well, not I think, what we are gonna do is we're gonna accept a motion, staff recommendations for agenda items 21A and then C through K. So is there a motion? Is there a second? All right, all in favor, say aye. Are there any opposed? Okay, congratulations, everyone. Thank you for being
Great.
here.
Thank you so much.
We will go back. Director Riss said that as board members, because we're going overtime, she'll double our wages, so.
Mr. Chair, we already voted on 21B. I just want to make sure. Okay.
We did vote on that, one, yes.
Thank you.
So now we're back to agenda item 20.
Chairman, I have some great news for the board. We don't have any other contracts that have a first right of refusal written into it.
All right. So where are we then on 20 then, after the break?
Potential language for a board member motion. It's no longer, I mean, I think we've moved out of staff's recommendation. And so this is language that could be adopted by a board member to make a motion, which I tried to track the discussion we had earlier. I've also included direction to staff to include in the letter a summary of what's owed upon sale of the property, because the amended agreement, it's complicated in that it breaks the loan out to different loans. They have different interest rates. Those interest rates change if it's sold within the planning period. So I thought it was important that the letter summarize what the repayment should be. So I've included that in my draft language, but of course it's up to the board and the board member making the motion if they want to include that concept in the motion. But I will go ahead and share my screen.
That clarifies. And then our agenda. Thank you, Jen. That's fantastic. Thank you guys for this. Okay, yes.
So the board, I motion that the board directs staff to respond to pause with the letter stating that as follows, the CWCB in its receipt of its January 17, 2025 letter informing the CWCB in the Southwest San Juan Water Conservation District of its decision to sell the Running Iron Ranch. The CWCB is not at this time making a decision as to whether to purchase the Running Irons Ranch under paragraph 5.1 of the amended agreement. The CWCB reserves its right to exercise or not exercise the right of first refusal if it is determined in the case number 24 CV 30069 that pause is able to sell the running iron wrench, or PAWS otherwise is able to move forward with the sale of the running irons wrench. The letter should also summarize the requirements of the repayment of the loan under the amended agreement upon any sale.
Thank you, Director Cloud. Is there a second? Sorry, did you have a question or a second?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Is Director McLeod on still? That'd be
He is online, yes, he's still online. So, so then were you seconding that? Okay, so Director Vasquez with a second. Is there any other discussion? Director McLeod, were you able to see that or hear that?
I saw it and I heard it and I would vote yes.
Okay. All right, so if there's no other discussion, Director, or sorry, Jen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to note, and I think this is a decision the board has made, but in not responding substantively right now to the notice we received in January, there is some risk that PAWS takes the position that we've lost the ability to decide to purchase the property. I think the board is aware of this risk and is okay with that risk. I just wanted to highlight it for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I appreciate that, Jen. Is there any other discussion on the motion? Aye. Are there any opposed? Okay, thank you. I guess at that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
No.
You've got to be kidding me. I was so close to. Where are we?
Then item 22.
Oh my goodness, just,
Where to go?
I don't know where I am here. I don't even, sorry. I think I gotta go back this way. That's what I'm saying. I'm out of order here. Oh, here we are. Okay. I think Director Cloud messed with mine. Okay, so we are still on 22 now. Go ahead.
I'll make this quick. Good afternoon, Elizabeth Scudder, CWCB staff for the record. I'm here to present agenda item 22, the PEPO statewide initiatives grant application from CSU's Colorado Water Center for Colorado Project WET. The PEPO statewide initiatives grant fund supports efforts that further statewide education and outreach initiatives that have broad multi-basin scope and support. Funding is requested to revitalize and implement Project WET throughout Colorado. Project WET is a national education program that provides hands-on, science-based water education resources to educators, giving pre-K through 12th graders the knowledge and experience to become water stewards and to build water literacy for the next generation. Project WET in Colorado has stagnated over the past 5 years due to pandemic and capacity issues, and the Colorado Water Center, as the new host institution, aims to rebuild the program statewide. Funding will support a 3-year implementation plan that will include the recruitment of new facilitators through trainings across the state, an inventory of curriculum for Colorado and River Basin specific issues, and the development of a sustainable funding model for the continuation of the program. Through the Project WET facilitator trainings, educator workshops, classroom implementation, and stakeholder outreach, the applicant will reach approximately 15,700 Coloradans in years 1 through 3, with 15,000 being pre-K through 12 youth. In the first year, the facilitator workshops will be focused on the Front Range, including in the Metro, South Platte, and Arkansas basins. And in the second and third years, trainings will be focused on the Western Slope, including in the Rio Grande, Colorado, and Yampa White Green basins. The applicant received letters of support from the Colorado Alliance for Environmental Education, Colorado Watershed Assembly, CSU Extension, Colorado State Forest Service, Greenway Foundation, and the Rio Grande Watershed Conservation and Education Initiative for this project. Staff recommends full funding. I believe we have Alex Colopy from the Water Center online for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Is there any questions or any concerns? Director Vasquez.
In the text of the one pager, it said, when it talks about the West Slope, it says basins including. Can it include the North Platte?
We can reach back out to the applicant and see if
Okay.
they can
Let
do
me
that.
know. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Is there any other questions? Dr. House?
Not a question, just a comment that, you know, this work is so critical to getting kids invested early in water, and that's how you start training the next generation of water professionals. So I would make I would move staff recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Go ahead and do 23 as well, Kurt. Since we're here, yes.
It's me again, Kirk Russell, Finance Section Chief. This last item is some good news. we're owners of shares in the Chatfield Reservoir Reallocation Project. And those of you that don't spend a lot of time in the metro area, this is a reservoir just upstream of Littleton on the South Platte, and it was put in place primarily to protect Denver from another flood, massive flood back in, I want to say the early mid-60s. And we've been part of this project since the beginning. It was a dam that was built to provide flood protection of Denver, and they determined through feasibility study that it had some excess capacity that could be utilized by water providers in the metro area and downstream of in the South Platte Basin. So we were able, as with a group of other participants, to reallocate 20,600 acre feet of that reservoir, and we've been holding shares of that increase in space for water supply as a result of some participants that felt that the project was taking too long or it was costing too much. And so we, long before me, and Director Riss was on the board of this reallocation and the efforts to get it into where it is today. But we inherited some of those shares as a result of participants backing out, and we have been selling those shares over time. And now we are to the point where we have our last 1,000 acre feet remaining that are available to sell, and the Central Colorado Water Conservancy District has indicated they would like to purchase that. The original price of the project, I have on there the $171 million, which equated to $8,300 an acre foot. That actually was increased over the time of the project through some cost increases. But in addition to that dollar amount, we've been keeping track. So the participants put money in a trust fund, and over time, the project drew those down, and we had some folks that borrowed money from us that also contributed to their proportion of the project cost, participating in their variation of ownership. And once that trust was taken all the way down to zero, there were still some lingering, I called them project costs. They weren't operation and maintenance activities. They were actually directly related to getting the project to completion. The substantial completion actually occurred in 2020, and we started filling the reservoir and started assessing members for that additional cost. And so I've been tracking that over time because we did have these for sale, and that's that additional $265.70 per acre foot on top of the $8,300 that we show there. Currently, we own 2,152 acre feet. It is 1,000 of that we are recommending that we sell. Actually, I'm sorry. The 2,152, I apologize. The 2,152 is space available to sell, but we have a contract for 1,152 of that is already under contract to sell to Castle Rock, and they're buying it on an annual basis through an agreement. And that leaves this 1,000 acre feet for sale that Central has indicated they want to purchase. Real quick, some photographs of the work done on this prior to me getting involved on the board. A lot of money was spent in the marina in order to make that marina move with the new fluctuating non-flood type movement that a normal year's work or use of that supply space was going to cause. the Parks and Wildlife folks. CPW has a lease on that land, and so a lot of work went into raising parking lots and bathrooms and things like that as a result of the fluctuating water surface. And as Director Riss showed, the removal of trees, inundation of trees became an issue in the last couple of years. We had a significant amount of moisture come in during the course of, I think it was 2022, and it was anticipated it was going to take a long time to get there. It actually happened real quick, and we found, because of the way the hydrology worked in the South Platte, we found that the trees were staying inundated a lot longer than anticipated. And so it would have been a lot easier to take out the trees had we all known what the future looked like, but it's always unpredictable. And in this case, we've enjoyed the additional water in the reservoir, but at the same time, it caused a significant impact to those trees. And they did not like to be inundated for multiple seasons. So that's what it looked like. That is not my paddle board that you're looking over the bow of, but it looks like a nice one. But yeah, the work to take those trees out in an inundated situation with a helicopter is certainly a lot more expensive than being able to go in with surface removal. This is the table of information that I wanted to share. You see that 2152 is what we currently have as orphan shares. 1,000 of it is being requested, and that 1152 is the one I indicated was under contract. That would empty our orphan share supply. There is some activities that the Central Water, and I should correct this, Central Water Conservancy District's sub-district, which is the groundwater management sub-district of the Central Colorado Water Conservancy District, is actually the buyer in this case. They've got to go through a process within the organization that manages those shares. And so they wanted to actually come to the board with a loan at this board meeting because they want to borrow money from this board in order to purchase something this board owns. And so we'll work that out in a future board meeting. But we indicated it'd be better if we had them go through the process with the actual purchase activities within inside of I'll call it similar to a ditch company. And so we'll be back possibly in May recommending a loan to the district, the groundwater management sub-district in May, if all that plays out correctly. But I needed to get clearance from the board that the board agrees to sell this 1,000 acre feet. And with that, staff recommendation is on the screen to do so.
All right, thank you, Kirk. Does anybody have any questions? Interest? Dr. Cameron.
Curiosity, what are the water rights currently used for? I mean, is it going to be an injury to sell to Central?
Say it again, please.
If the water rights are used for something else besides Central, are we hurting somebody selling those?
Thank you for the question. So a point of clarification, the Chatfield Reservoir reallocation project is nothing more than airspace available behind that dam. No water rights are related to this sale. It is Central's water rights that they would be putting in the reservoir, and those are conditional rights that they have ready to do so.
Thank you. Sorry, real quick question, Kirk. Just curious, this is intent to sell, but not the terms of what that actual sale would be. I'm just trying to get my head around the price, and assuming it was maybe that rough number, if I recall right, $8,600 per acre foot multiplied by the 1,000. So is that?
Yep, that's correct. So yeah, it'd be about 8.6 million in a loan with a service fee on top of that. If the board considers that in the future. I did want to point out, Director Johnson, that one of the things I didn't include in the board memo, I just listed a couple of the folks that purchased water or purchased space from us in this reallocation. And it did include Denver purchased a significant chunk of orphan shares back in 2021, I want to say. Center of Colorado Water Conservancy District purchased a couple hundred. Or maybe 10. Anyway, there have been other ones that I did not include in my memo, and I apologize. I probably go deep enough on that.
I just want to note that this is really pretty historic. We have been dealing with these orphans for a long time, as long as I've been around, and there was never really a solid plan for how we were gonna find new parents for the orphans, and I'm just really relieved and pleased that they finally found a forever home.
It's a great example of build it and they will come, and it turned out successful.
Okay. Yes, please, Director Vasquez.
So I'm jumping forward and thinking about this loan. It's almost like if you're selling a piece of real estate, you're doing a carryback.
I'm not back to the real estate stuff. I'm not super familiar with that, but again, we traditionally do not take, even though this isn't property, it's airspace behind the dam, we wouldn't take it as collateral. But yeah, it is kind of an interesting relationship when we're the seller of something we own and loaning money out of one pocket to pay ourselves back.
Back in the
Exactly.
other pocket, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, is there a motion for staff recommendation on agenda item 23? Ask a motion to approve. Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Okay.
Chairman Combs, before I leave the microphone, I just cannot say enough about what happens over here behind this curtain. And I'm usually better at having my items crisp and clean. And when you're watching one of those Broadway shows and after the show's over, they come out and they stand up and take the bow. I wish we could do that every board meeting behind this curtain, because it is impressive what they pull off. So thankful for their efforts.
Thank you for bringing that up, Kirk. We appreciate it, Viola, and all of you, and all you're doing over there. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. Do we have anybody on public comment online?
I'll just ask a very general question of staff or Lauren. Any of the loan processes or even grant processes, are there procurement policy associated with, for example, how contractors are selected or materials are purchased and delivered? Or is it all on the applicant?
Kirk, do you want to answer that?
Correctly, Director Wind, I think you're saying how deep does the contract relationship between us and a grantee or us and a borrower go into what they are required to do from a bidding standpoint or a material solicitation. It is a little bit loose. It isn't real structured. I will say that the loan program is much tighter, and my excuse for that is that loan requires repayment, so we want to make sure that they're getting the best value out of their efforts to bid it and just go through the process. And keep in mind that some of our borrowers are ditch companies and some are municipalities. The municipalities might have their own procurement requirements, so we respect that. But our project managers routinely review the process they went through to solicit bids and make sure we get the best, or at least get the borrower to get the best opportunity for their project that they can. The grant side of things, it's just handled a little bit different, but yes, there are requirements inside of that. They might not be as strict. But yeah, the project managers are supposed to be paying attention to somebody, not just go grabbing whatever opportunity is out there. I know during the 2013 floods, we flexed a fair bit even in the loan program because the activities necessary to get those structures back in place required us to, we had more oversight, but we also flexed more so where there was only one contractor available. And as long as it didn't appear to be taking advantage of the vulnerabilities of a borrower, we felt comfortable with it. But
Grant section chief, and I just wanted to add for grants. Grants are not subject to the state's procurement policies. We do have a separate thing that we follow, and that is we have to do a competitive, ours are competitive grants, and so we do a request for applications, but they are still subject to state fiscal rules.
I want to do. What, accept a motion to adjourn. Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? Have a second? If someone says no, you can stay here as long as you want. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? All right, we're at it. Sure.